It's Monday morning, and it's time for the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment. Welcome to it. I'm your host, John Justice, and I'm glad you're with the show once again this morning. Joining me here to help in producing the show is Isaac. Good morning, Isaac. How are we doing today, sir?
Good morning, John. Happy Monday.
Yeah, man. Did you have a good weekend?
Yeah, it was pretty good.
All right.
Pretty chill.
I went and saw, we'll talk a little bit about this in a moment, Spider-Man Brand New Day.
I heard it was fantastic.
It did not, it had no business being as good as it was. I'll put it that way. I went in with with low expectations, and I'll explain why here in just a moment. It absolutely cleaned up at the box office, though. It killed. And I have some thoughts on this, because this is very odd to me. So we'll spend a little bit of time on that as we kick off the show this morning. President Donald Trump blames Iran over the weekend for the water cyber attacks, although there is new information now that it wasn't just our water systems here in Minnesota that were cyber attacked. There were neighboring states that also had similar circumstances, and so we'll get into that. We have a lot of guests on the show this morning, as we do every Monday. We'll talk with the president of the Institute for Liberty, Andrew Langer. He'll be joining us right around 6:30 today. We're going to get into the controversies surrounding Sophie Cunningham, the WNBA game against the Fever and the Lynx this weekend, the protests that took place from the on-the-street lunatics out in front of the Target Center. So we may talk a bit about that with Andrew when he joins us at the bottom of the hour. Also, we have an update on the St. Paul mayor, Cooley Herr. We have Senate candidate Tom Weiler will be joining us in the American Experiment studio at 7:30 this morning, and we'll talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly relating to energy policy with a policy fellow here at Center of the American Experiment, Darren Nelson, joining us at 8:30 today. We have actually a really, really busy week ahead with the primaries coming up next Tuesday. A lot of candidates will be on the show this week. I have interviews scheduled for the following week already with some very high-profile individuals that I'm really, really excited to have conversations with, and obviously for you to take part in those conversations. If you want to get involved in today's show or any show, you can email me, john.justice@americanexperiment.org. You can also leave us a blast, a comment. All you have to do is call 612-584-4565. By the way, on a technical note and a little on-air production meeting, I think I might have found a solution to the blaster comments being the audio being low. It's probably one of the things that we've been fighting since we kicked off the show last week. So I think I might have found a solution. We'll find out. I'm doing a trial run and on a program, and it's one of those things where I think the trial run is holding back. Like, they're going to give me a little bit of what it can do, but not all of what it can do. So we'll test that a little bit later on. But leave your comments on whatever we're talking about here on the show. Again, 612-584-4565. So I was not impressed with the trailers leading into Spider-Man Brand New Day. I was always going to go see it opening weekend, make no mistake. But the trailers themselves just really didn't do a whole lot for me. It's Marvel. I'm easily entertained, so I'm going to go see, for the most part, most Marvel movies. Although several of them I've only gone and seen once, especially the more recent Marvel films in the latest phase. They really dropped in quality after Endgame and Infinity War. So I had completely forgotten that this was even coming out this week. So I ended up buying tickets. We went to go see it on Friday afternoon. It was me, my wife Melinda, and Kyle, our 19-year-old, who'll be visiting here tomorrow, by the way, just as a side note. Not on the show, but he'll be coming down to hang out for a bit. That being said, as we mentioned at the start of the show, this movie had no business being as good as it was. It opened to a massive $355 million. It made The second biggest amount domestically in terms of a debut in box office history. Just shy of Avengers Endgame, the film surpassed all expectations, breaking records on Thursday previews, Friday and Saturday grosses. I thought I was misreading the headlines on this. I follow this stuff. If you listen to the show for any length of time, I'm a nerd. As a matter of fact, there was a talkback that rolled in Friday that I did not get the opportunity to play that basically was just about that, how big of a nerd I am. But I had no expectations at all that this movie was going to make this much money. And then a couple of things popped into mind. First off, I think people forget how huge No Way Home was. I remember when Spider-Man No Way Home was released and just what a massive blockbuster that was, especially, spoiler alert, considering that it had included previous Spider-Mans. How do you say that? Do you say Spider-Men or do you say Spider-Mans? I think you say Spider-Men, right?
Probably Spider-Man.
I think so, yeah. Spider-Mans just sounds weird. And I don't think it's grammatically correct. But people forget just how massive that original movie was. So I think that's a part of it. But the other aspect of this, too, and this I was following, there was no major negativity going into this film at all. There was no commentary like there is with virtually every other film out there within the fandom that I saw leading into this movie. There was no controversy. There was no concern about, and this would play into controversy, there was no concern about there being any woke agenda attached to it, and there wasn't. Now, I know in the story that I have in front of me, it says, again, it landed, Spider-Man Brand New Day, landed just short of the all-time domestic opening weekend. 2.1 million short of Avengers Endgame back in 2019, $357 million. And what's interesting about this, too, is that the box office has just been suffering greatly. I mean, you consider how poorly The Mandalorian and Grogu did. You look at the independent films that came out, whether it's Obsession or Backrooms. I saw Obsession, not in the theater, though. I actually watched that streaming online. Did not see Backrooms, although my boys did. There's been this dramatic shift in terms of people going to the movies. But Brand New Day went and shattered Sony's own projections. The Sony Pictures chairman credited the film's emotional storyline for its commercial reach, and I'll give that to him, except for the fact that you don't know that it has an emotional storyline until you actually go and see the film. And that wasn't a part, at least from what I saw, because I did see commentary leading into the movie. I just thought it was another week out before it was released, which is why I mentioned before that I forgot that it opened this week. I had seen some of the early responses and the early reviews from individuals, but I still thought that it was a week or so away. I didn't realize it came out to this week. And that was not really much of the commentary leading into this movie. And I really do think that there is this desire by the movie-going public to still be entertained, to still go to the theater. I don't think that movie theaters are dead or dying. I do think that the fandom has been incredibly detrimental to films because a lot of individuals do base their opinion or their plans to go see a film in the theater based off of what they're hearing ahead of time. And if a movie ends up getting roasted ahead of time over a bunch of concern, especially concern, as I mentioned before, of the liberal agenda being included, then people are less likely to go. In this case, you had a film that, it's a Spider-Man movie. People just want to be entertained. There didn't seem to be anything negative attached to it. The previous film was a massive hit, and this movie just did absolute gangbusters. My wife even said that, Melinda said, Isaac, that it might be her favorite Spider-Man movie ever.
Wow. Mm-hmm. That's a high bar.
It is a very high bar. And there were some huge revelations in it. Typically I would have spoiled myself on a movie like this. I don't have problems knowing spoilers beforehand. Certain films I want to wait. Right. There's certain ones that I want to wait. But a lot of times I like the lead-in of hearing rumors and speculation that to me is very entertaining, even if it spoils the film. But because I wasn't really that interested doing that thing with my fingers in this movie, I didn't do any dig deeping on the potential of characters showing up. And there were some shocking revelations in this film. I was like, whoa, I didn't know that was coming. That was cool, especially if you're into Marvel, if you're into any of the Marvel stuff, right? There's some huge character revelations. So are you going to go see it, Isaac? I mean, are you a big Marvel movie fan?
Yeah, I follow along. I don't know about big. I'll always go to the big ones in theaters.
Yeah.
But this one I'll go see.
Okay. Just didn't have time over the weekend?
Yeah.
Too busy going to the Lynx game?
Yeah, exactly.
We'll talk about that coming up a little bit later on. Let's go here. The latest regarding the water system cyber attack and what's been happening with Iran as of late, wherein there seems to be another attempt at negotiations of a peace deal. First off, though, President Donald Trump, according to the article from KARE 11, offered no evidence for the claim, blaming Governor Tim Walz for the recent cyber attacks on the state's water systems. This, of course, contradicts federal and state officials who believe the Iranian hackers were responsible. Trump, again, providing no evidence for his claim, instead accused Minnesota of incompetence and corruption. I've got a couple of clips here, one relating to both. One relating to the water system's cyber attack and the other relating to potential corruption here in Minnesota. I think I could be wrong here. Okay. And this is not me being like a Trump apologist or anything, right? Because Trump will often say things and sometimes they're not accurate. Okay. Let's be honest here. Still support the guy, but I think that he was kind of joking here. I get the sense that, in the absence of knowing exactly where the cyber attack came from, he decided to take kind of a sarcastic route. I've often said that President Donald Trump is the closest that we will ever get to having a president who is a talk show host, because that's how he speaks. He speaks in these broad generalities. I think that's why so many conservative talk show hosts, for the most part, don't really have much to gripe about regarding Trump's commentary. I know I don't, because of that very reason. Because as a conservative news talk show host, I know what it's like to go and generalize and to make jokes. Wherein I could see myself making a joke that, well, I know they're saying, it was Iran that was potentially involved in the cyber attack hacking into our water system. But you know what? Minnesota's so corrupt, it could just be Governor Tim Walz and Thief Ellison. Right? See, that kind of thing. So you be the judge here. I got a couple of clips. Here's clip number 1, talking specifically about what I just mentioned.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Can you rule out that Iran is behind the water attack? Can you rule out that Iran is behind that cyber attack?
I don't. No, I think that Minnesota is behind it. You know who's behind it? Minnesota, because they're grossly incompetent. I think the governor's behind it. I don't think there was an Iranian cyber attack. I think that Minnesota ought to get its act together. It's one of the worst run states. J.D. will tell you. We found tremendous corruption in Minnesota.
Yes, sir.
And by the way, just gave me a report. Massive future things having to do with corruption in Minnesota are happening right now. Thank you very much.
The bigger takeaway here isn't so much what President Donald Trump said about this, right? We
found tremendous corruption in Minnesota. Yes, sir. And by the way, just gave me a report. Massive future things having to do with corruption in Minnesota are happening right now.
Yeah, and hopefully, just as a side note, I was previewing some fairly large guests next week. Perhaps further details on what President Donald Trump said about the future exposure of corruption here in Minnesota with one of those guests next week. But working through the KARE 11 piece, Trump had made these comments during a cabinet meeting at Camp David in Maryland over the weekend. The president then added massive future things having to do with corruption in Minnesota. You heard the audio I just played. But Governor Tim Walz appeared to respond with a short social media message Friday afternoon that simply read, "Trump can't beat Iran because he's too busy waging war with Minnesota." I mean, what a horrible thing to say. My expectations, speaking of expectations, they were certainly higher for Spider-Man Brand New Day than they are for anything competent coming out of Governor Tim Walz. But that being said, I mean, to say that Trump can't beat Iran, I mean, is he not? He's clearly isn't. Is he not thinking about what he's saying with making a comment like that? You're the sitting governor of the state of Minnesota, and you're essentially saying that our military is incapable of going and carrying out the operations they're carrying out. That, to me, is the takeaway of what Tim Walz is saying. But again, that moron doesn't think about the ramifications of his words. We've seen examples of that time and time again when it comes to that moron. Whether it's the Elon Musk watching the stock drop, the ICE is the
Buffalo
Gestapo.
Fluffalo.
The list just goes on and on. But that should be the story. This is who the media should be talking about. You know, I understand the importance of the cyber attack and getting further information on it. And as I mentioned, there were like another 5 other states that apparently also suffered this cyber attack, which goes back to, you know, either Trump didn't have the knowledge and was just trying to make a joke about Minnesota corruption being involved in, or he could have been serious. I don't know. But considering that other states were attacked, it looks like this was coming from an outside enemy, and Iran would make the most obvious sense. But if we had local media worth anything here in Minnesota, then they would actually go and follow up with Governor Tim Walz over that comment that he made. Because what a horrible thing to say. I know he thinks he's being cute. I know he thinks he's being funny, but he's not. It's incredibly disrespectful to our brave men and women in the military that are currently trying to go and keep Iran at the, you know, president's behest from being able to obtain a nuclear weapon and to go and wage war against us and our allies. Speaking of which, President Donald Trump did say over the weekend that he is ordering American forces to hold off on new strikes against Iran, claiming that the Mideast allies have reached the parameters of a deal to end the 5-month-old war. Yes, I understand. We've been in this place several times when it comes to President Donald Trump, and it's kind of unavoidable. Trump is trying to go and negotiate with Iran to do what I just mentioned, to make sure that they cannot obtain a nuclear weapon, that they cannot continue their murderous war waging against our allies. And so he's doing the right thing when they want to step up and look to diplomacy. But we also know that Iran can't be trusted. This is a regime that absolutely hates the West. And there's an argument to be made that what Iran is doing, and I'm sure that the Department of War, a friend of the show, Pete Hegseth, Trump, and everybody in the administration is aware of this. But what we're starting to see here is possibly Iran attempting to delay all of this long enough to get to, say, October, wherein they would have more leverage on the deal-making aspect of this because we would be so close to the midterm elections. That makes sense to me. But President Donald Trump was poised to launch another massive strike against the Iranian regime. We reported this on Friday. Iran's defense minister said on X that the country was neither surprised nor passive following Trump's announcement, and said Iran continues to remain alert in the face of concrete threats from the U.S. A regional official said the proposal announced by Trump over the weekend calls for the U.S. and Iran to return to negotiations and continue working out many of the issues that have stymied prior progress on the deals. I got a couple of clips of Trump talking about Iran. Here's the first, and I believe one, if not both of these, he was on board Air Force One at the time.
What is the status of talks? Who from the administration is talking to the Iranians?
But they break their word so often. Steve is talking.
Okay, this clip here was done from Camp David over the weekend. The next one I have was on, I believe, President Donald Trump's return trip to D.C.
Is talking, Jared. We have very good people. JD's involved, very strongly involved. We have great people talking. Marco's involved.
Because they say talks aren't happening.
Very good people. We have the best people. But they'll make a deal. As an example, we'll talk about nuclear. And we'll be in there talking about nuclear for 7 hours. I say, why doesn't What do you need 7? You can take 10 minutes. You have 5 minutes. You should solve it. But 7 hours, and then they'll go out, and I'll say they discussed nuclear. And they'll go out and they'll say, we never discussed nuclear. And I say, what do they say? All they do is make me angry. You know, you just make me angry.
Here's Trump on board Air Force One talking about how they were ramping up for a massive strike against Iran.
We were asked by the 3 primary groups. We were also asked by Iran, very strongly, actually. They said, we'd like to make a deal. Now, you know, I don't know what they say, because a lot of times they'll say that to me, and then they'll go out and say, we don't know what he's talking about. Obviously, they don't want to be attacked. And they knew the extent of the attack because they saw it forming.
What happens now?
Well, now what we're doing is we're talking to them in the form of a negotiation. It begins tomorrow afternoon, and we'll see if it's true. I'd love to do that, save a lot of lives, save a lot of unnecessary power, to be honest with you. It'll take many, many years to ever build it back. If it could, I don't think it would be even buildable back. So we had an attack that would be the biggest attack since World War II, and it would have been disastrous for them. And they didn't want us to do it. And frankly, Saudi Arabia didn't want it either. They thought that a deal is imminent.
So we'll certainly be keeping an eye on the developments throughout the week as Trump continues to try to find a diplomatic pathway to end the conflict. And as I mentioned before, this could be, and we'll see what shakes out this week with this latest attempt to bring Iran to a firm deal. But I'm as concerned as anybody that Iran is simply playing this game in order to try to gain leverage by not coming to a deal, a firm agreement, until we get closer to the midterm elections. But again, I trust the administration that they are doing the right thing regarding all of this. Coming up in just a moment, Idaho fast food restaurant. The story's kind of already drifted from the headlines less than 24 hours after it happened. But an Idaho fast food restaurant shooting suspect ended up killing himself among 4 dead over the weekend. A good guy with a gun thwarted the effort. I'll have all the details, and we'll talk with Andrew Langer, the president of the Institute for Liberty. Remember, if you want to leave a comment, you can leave us a blast on the blaster line. 612-584-4565 is the phone number. Also, john.justice@americanexperiment.org. I got to thank a friend of the show, Rick, photographer Rick. He works with us. He works with Alpha News. He was shooting a lot of photographs and video from the America 250 rally a couple weekends back. Did a photo shoot with me here recently for the new show, John Justice, presented by American Experiment. And I was going through the photographs, and I was so happy with how it turned out, especially the fact that I wasn't cringing every time I saw the pictures. I've lost 22 pounds. I feel healthier than I have in years. And it is only because of the absolutely incredible program from NutraWave. Dr. Bob has this amazing program wherein, listen, you don't feel like yourself anymore. That was certainly the case for me. I mean, be honest. Your old self would be disappointed in you. I was disappointed in me, right? I used to carry around a level of confidence because of the fact that I was just healthier and I wasn't, as morbidly obese, right? I still need to lose some weight here. I'm actually going to do another round on the program soon. But my confidence has returned. Those photographs I'm so happy with, and it's all because of the amazing program from NutraWave. There's no pills. There's no shots. For over 13 years, NutraWave has helped thousands of men and women lose the weight, just like they did for me. Now, all of this, take the first step starting today. Trust me, it is an incredible program, and it changes your relationship with food. I love food, and I still get to enjoy the food that I want to enjoy, but I have an absolutely different relationship with the food than I ever did before. You can get a Truth Metabolic Scan and free red light therapy session. I've done this. It's incredibly effective. All you've got to do, and there's absolutely nothing to lose, all you have to do is call 952-260-1965. Again, that's 952 260-1965 and mention the word strike. NutraWave has limited slots available to take advantage of this free Truth Metabolic Scan and free red light therapy. So call today, 952-260-1965. If you miss that number, drop me an email, john.justice@americanexperiment.org. I'm happy to share it with you. But again, no pills, no shots, just an incredible way to lose weight and permanently change your relationship with food. Trust me, it's worked for me. It'll absolutely work for you. So call NutraWave today. That is 952-260-1965. Now, here's some content you might have missed at AmericanExperiment.org and the American Experiment podcast. Matt Dean talking with Katherine Johnson, and we'll speak with the president of the Institute for Liberty next here on the John Justice Show.
I looked it up, and the percentage of children in poverty in Minnesota is about 10%, which is lower than the national average. So how come somewhere around a third, 33%, say, of children in Minnesota are on Medicaid if they aren't poor?
Sure. My kids are grown now, but I had 3 kids that I raised. And for us, we could make over $100,000 a year and still our kids would be on Medicaid, if you can imagine that. That's middle class. That's crazy. And, we also as a state, I think we should really measure ourselves by how few people have to rely on the government for health care, not how many. Mm-hmm. But if you ask, Governor Walz, he'll say, the more people we feed, the better. The more people on government programs, the better. And that's really how he measures the state. And we really see that in the numbers in Medicaid, which have just exploded.
Think about it. Now that school's back in session, how are Minnesota students doing? Not very well. Minnesota ACT scores fell again last year and are the lowest they've been in 10 years. In fact, fewer than half of Minnesota students can either read or do math at grade level. Think about it. We used to brag about our schools. Now we're losing to states like Mississippi. Visit AmericanExperiment.org for more information. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
We're doing a really big deep dive on Medicaid right now at the center. We're looking at just how the heck this has gotten so out of control in Minnesota. And just like since 2023, okay, we spent $18 billion on Medicaid in the state, okay? Now we are spending $27 billion in this year, okay? And we are spending that on fewer people on Medicaid. So there was 1.4 million people on Medicaid in 2023. Now there is 1.2. So you have to ask yourself, how in the heck can we be spending that much more money on Medicaid? And we're really looking into that because we think a lot of that money is going to people who are dead, people who live in other states, people who are on more than one program. And you are not surprised because you've seen that on so many different programs in the state of Minnesota. But Medicaid is by far the biggest enchilada when it comes to that.
Think about it. Now that school's out for the summer, how are Minnesota students doing? Not very well. Minnesota ACT scores fell again last year and are the lowest they've been in 10 years. In fact, fewer than half of Minnesota students can either read or do math at grade level. Think about it. We used to brag about our schools. Now we're losing to states like Mississippi. Visit AmericanExperiment.org for more information. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
It is the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment and AmericanExperiment.org. You can email john.justice@AmericanExperiment.org, and you can leave us a blast at any point during the show. That number is 612-584-4565. Again, that's 612-584-4565. Horrible news broke over the weekend. A shooting at an In-N-Out restaurant in Twin Falls, Idaho, ended up resulting in 4 deaths, including the gunman, Chad Williams, and 7 injuries. An off-duty officer and an armed citizen intervened, diverting the gunman and preventing further casualties. Good guy with a gun, which is partly the reason why this story is going to disappear from the headlines, beyond the fact that we don't have a really good understanding of a motive when it comes to this attack. The FBI is seeking the public's assistance in gathering information and images related to the incident. The suspect in the fatal shooting at the fast food restaurant died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. This happened on Sunday, crediting the off-duty officer and a citizen with firing the shots that diverted him. Investigators are confident that the gunman, identified as a 24-year-old Chad Williams, acted alone during the shooting at an In-N-Out in Twin Falls. The police chief, Michael Hicks, gave details during a press conference. In all, 4 people died, including Williams. 7 others were injured at the recently opened restaurant in the southern Idaho city of about 56,000 people. Yeah, apparently this In-N-Out had just opened up a week earlier on the 24th. Part of California's based company's recent expansion into Idaho. And I've always been told that the whole reason why In-N-Out doesn't expand, because I've talked about In-N-Out a ton on the show, because my whole family are huge fans. My son will take trips out west just to go and get to In-N-Out. But I've always heard that the whole reason why In-N-Out didn't expand was because they were concerned about the quality of the food diminishing depending on just how far from their base of operations they were going to be. That being said, they have been expanding into Idaho. But getting back to this shooting, Hicks said an off-duty state trooper and an armed citizen whose identities weren't immediately disclosed both fired back and diverted the gunman from the restaurant. We believe their actions helped to drive the suspect away from the scene, preventing further casualties, the chief said. We want to take a moment and commend the actions of the off-duty officer and the citizen and their heroic action to stop the incident. Hicks said detectives were working to determine Williams' motives and said the suspect's family was cooperating fully with law enforcement. Officials asked potential witnesses or anyone with information to contact the police. The police chief also warned that misinformation that was spreading online identifying a different man as the shooter, saying that person had no involvement in the incident whatsoever. Police who responded to the shooting said they found the body of the suspected gunman in an area near the restaurant. And again, without a motive for this particular incident, it's kind of already disappeared from the headlines. I know there was some talk that, at least what I saw online preliminarily, am I saying that right? Tongue-tied. The first information that I've seen said the individual might be a conservative. He had written a few posts online that might have been related to him being a conservative. But like I said, I saw that in only a couple of different places, and I'm not putting any credence behind that. Andrew Langer, president of the Institute for Liberty, I'm sure you saw this story of the Idaho In-N-Out shooting. Have you seen anything regarding the background of this individual, this 24-year-old at all?
No, but if someone's going after shooting up folks at an In-N-Out burger, obviously that says something. So, but yeah, I haven't seen anything regarding this person's political backgrounds.
Good morning, by the way. Good to see you as always. Thank you so much for joining the show today. Did you get out to see Spider-Man Brand New Day yet?
So I have not seen Spider-Man Brand New Day. I have not seen the Odyssey. I'm trying to figure out when we're going to be able to see both, because wanna catch those as soon as possible. I'm just hearing nothing but great things about it.
Yeah, I'm just shocked. I was talking about it at the start of the show. I'm shocked at how much money Spider-Man Brand New Day made. And I think it's a couple of things that I mentioned earlier. One, I think that people, maybe I did, forgot just how successful No Way Home was. I mean, that was a massive, massive hit. And then two, there was no major controversy leading into this movie. And I think it shows that there is still an audience out there that wants to go to the movies to just see good films. And when you don't have the media ranting and raving about, either side, whether it's liberal or conservative, pushing back on a film before it's released, then people are more likely to end up showing up at your local movie theater.
It's funny. I started watching that Apple TV. I don't have Apple TV at home. It's like the one service we have not subscribed to. And I'm just holding out for that. But I watched the first couple of episodes of The Studio Was on a I was on a lot of plane travel this weekend, and so you can catch, if you fly United, you can catch your Apple, a bunch of your Apple TV shows. And I could not get through. I got through the first episode, and I could only get about halfway through the second episode. But one of the central theses of that show, at least I don't know where it goes from there, is, Seth Rogen plays a studio guy who wants to make good quality arty movies, and the studio president, I guess he's hired the studio head. I don't know titles, but the point is, his boss wants him to make a movie based upon the characters from the Kool-Aid commercials, the Kool-Aid Man, etc. And so it's a whole back and forth about this. And of course, as I'm watching it, the big thing is that at the same time, Martin Scorsese wants to make a movie about the Jim Jones Jonestown Massacre that they're going to call Kool-Aid. And it's just, it's hilarity ensues.
So did you only get through a few episodes because that's all you were able to watch, or because you were turned off and you pitched off from the show?
I was turned off by Seth Rogen's cringy antics. He just could not help himself, and it's like I have that tolerance for Larry David to a point. Like, I can't watch. I've watched a little bit of the new Larry David American History series. I love Curb Your Enthusiasm. I can tolerate that Larry David. But the Larry David in history bothered me. So something. It's apparently there's like an actual condition where folks physically get discomfort from watching. It's like the opposite of Schadenfreude, and I'm a big fan of Schadenfreude. I love taking joy in my opponent's misery. But this is just too much for me.
So I think it's one of the reasons why Melinda's not the biggest fan of Seinfeld, because she has a hard time with sort of the cringe watching. Although by comparison, Seinfeld is tame.
Mild.
Let's hang here for just a second. I want to get the audience up to speed. First off, I am with you, Andrew Langer, on the studio on Apple TV. I would, however, advise you, because I know exactly which episode you pitched off on. Stick with it, because I had exactly the same experience, as did my wife, watching that episode, because there's one that's really, really hard to watch because the Seth Rogen character is just comedy of forced errors.
Yes,
and it's tough to watch. Hang with it though, because it gets so much better.
I'll come back to it, because listen, guys, I'm the guy who I watched the second episode of the latest season of Star Trek: Strange New Worlds, and. By the way, it's 6:45 if you're tuning in on John's show right now. I'm someone who sits there and I will analyze Star Trek episode, and I love Star Trek. I am a Trekker, but I will sit there and go, no, why did you do that? It's like every time on the original series they would beam down onto a planet without any kind of security. And it's like you can see what's going to happen. It's you go on, if you find a derelict spaceship, wait till backup arrives, and then you go and you board the ship.
So I'm not going to recommend the studio because I don't do that, because it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, right? A lot of language and I want you to stick with it, because I know you can handle it. There's a lot of language in that show.
No problem with that.
Just briefly, though, and then we'll get to some more relevant items as we talk with Andrew Langer on the show this morning. But Melinda and I also watched that it's on HBO, whatever they're calling it now, HBO Max or whatever it is. But that history show with Larry David. Yeah. We watched the first episode last night, and Andrew, I'll tell you, I thought the first part of it, there are a series of vignettes. Right. And they're going through and they're telling, they're telling stories from the past, from our history, but they're doing parody sends up on it. Right. The one regarding Alexander Graham Bell, yes. I was crying, laughing, watching that episode last night. Yeah, it was really, really enjoyable.
I just had a real, hard time with the Declaration of Independence one. That was a little tough for me. Yes.
Well, I almost didn't get past the fact when the show opens, and I forgot what I can't recall what the name is. I don't know if you remember what the name was.
It's the Larry David History Show, John. That's really all.
Right. There you go. Yeah. But it opens up with former President Barack Obama, and I almost couldn't get past that, but I hung with it. And we'll probably watch the next couple of episodes. Let's go here. I know you got a couple of items that you want to talk about, but I want to get your take on, and I have a couple of clips. Bill Maher has been getting just a ton of attention over calling out specifically the Democrat socialists, the fact that so many within the Democrat Party are now leaning into communism to the point where he's actually stepping up and saying that he's not going to be voting for Democrats if this is the way that things are going to go. Let me play one clip from over the weekend where he's exposing the DSA. It's about a minute here on the John Justice Show. So here's a bit of what Bill Maher had to say from over the weekend on his show.
This crowd literally wants to get rid of our form of government, the Senate, but also, and I quote, replace the president and Supreme Court with an executive and judiciary chosen by and subordinate to Congress. Yeah, no biggie. Just taking the very essence of our government, which is 3 branches checking each other and shit-canning 2.5 of them. Who could be this nuts? I'll tell you who. Morons who are still wearing COVID masks in 2026. This photo is from the DSA meeting in Denver 3 weeks ago. Okay, I'm just going to say it. Since the far left, the far left, is overwhelmingly made up of affluent, ultra-woke white people, you raised your kids wrong. You told your precious brats that every brain fart was genius, and now those brain farts are becoming Democratic Party policy.
There's actually there's a bit of a loose connection here with something else that we're going to talk about. But let me just go ahead and get your instinctive reaction to what Bill Maher was saying here.
John, is that loose connection, that article from the Politico that I sent you? Because that's exactly
that's exactly the loose connection that I was going to refer to.
I mean, listen, he's not wrong. Though it's interesting because who is it? Fong, the woman who's running for governor in Wisconsin. She, the Democratic Socialist, who's most likely going to get the nomination, she was on Fox. Fox interviewed her over the weekend, and she was asked about sort of which principles and the platform she supports, and she expressed her continued admiration for separation of powers. But listen, at the end of the day, this comes out of the blueprint for how the Soviet Union, and I'm not making a joke. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not a joke that I'm making. But literally, this is exactly the way Soviet-style governments were created, right? You had a Supreme Soviet, which is their version of a Congress. And that Supreme Soviet would pick the various leaders. It would pick the judiciary and would pick it based upon your party standing. So, I mean, it's not as though there isn't a blueprint out there. And it's funny because, one of the things, John, that the socialists say to us is that true socialism has never been tried, right? Oh, all of these failed socialist experiments, that was never true socialism. But then you're pulling from the blueprint of these other socialist government systems, and you're saying that it's never been tried. You're trying exactly, what you're proposing is exactly what was tried before, and it failed miserably, or it descended into a tyranny, it descended into all kinds of things. And here's the reality is. The quiet part is they like the tyranny. They want the tyranny because they're the ones who are in charge. This is what Che Guevara called, not Michael Che Guevara called the pedagogy of the wall, which is where you essentially teach people by threatening them to be lined up against the wall and shot. That's to quote Saturday Night Live and their send up of Tucker Carlson. That's the rule. That's the goal now.
How significant is it that Bill Maher? He really is like the best example of a broken clock is right twice a day. He's willing to call it as he sees it. He doesn't carry any sort of major allegiance that blinds him to his view. He's willing to go and call out both sides, even though he typically leans left. How significant is it to have an individual like Bill Maher that's being so direct? Does he have enough reach, do you think? Do you think that this would encourage other Democrats like a Fetterman and others to sort of step out and begin to criticize the DSA? Or do you think that, everything is too segmented now and he doesn't carry that kind of cachet anymore?
Well, listen, I think Fetterman is free to do, and it feels free to do whatever Fetterman wants to do. I mean, that's how he's building his reputation. So, I think the thing that we admire about Bill Maher and to some extent when he was doing it more often and had a platform to do it more often because he's not on the air all the time, Jon Stewart, is that they at least still had that maintenance of the skepticism of big government power and the willingness to speak truth to power. And that's an important thing, and that's where we continue to be is our willingness to speak truth to power, and again to engage in that both sidesism, because that's a lot of what I saw over the weekend at the Western Conservative Summit in
Mm-hmm.
Denver that I attended. But yeah, I mean, the reality is, yes, there's the part of it that is segmented amongst the older set. But what he underscores, and this is the problem, is that you have, and this is going to be being old man yelling, "Get off my lawn." We have a bunch of young people who just don't give an S about what the right. Their response is going to be, "Okay, boomer, whatever, boomer." And that's the problem is that that whatever that okay boomer, whatever the meme is. See, and I'm a boomer, so I'm a boomer, so
I think you got it right. I think it's okay, boomer. I think
okay,
you got
boomer.
it right.
Yeah. So that's the attitude, and I'll tee it up, John, if you don't mind my hijacking. I sent John an article this morning that literally 3 different people, including one of your fans, one of your detractors, John, who feels compelled to at me on X, and it was one of these things where I wanted to write back and say, "Hey, dude, you're late to the game." But like a political science professor who's a conservative friend of mine sent it to me, and then a young woman that I've mentored, she's not even young, and she's in her 30s, I've mentored over the years, send it to me, which is this article about the sort of the dangerous lack of philosophy, coherent, and the lack of coherent conservative philosophy amongst young conservative activists, with the exception of the Turning Point people. We'll set that aside for a second, and their unwillingness to be taught, which is the real problem. The unwillingness of this generation, of the OK Boomer generation, to want to learn. And I'm not saying it's all, but there's a huge swatch of people. That's a massive problem. So, you can get Mike Pence up on stage in Denver at the Western Conservative Summit talking about, saying something very pithy, which is the Republicans may have lost their way in many cases, but the Democrats have lost their minds. And that's great for an audience that understands this. But when I'm having to explain to a 25-year-old staffer why capping credit card interest rates at 10% per year or 10% for a year is insanely bad and stupid policy, only to have that person say, "Yeah, but it would be really popular," that's a problem.
It's interesting in that piece. It talks about the concern among young, and I'm just pulling a quote from the article in Politico you mentioned, Andrew Langer. The concern that young Republicans are blind, ideological, and sort of loyal to a fault rather than competent and intelligent. I would be curious, when a statement gets made like that, I'd like to know who they are referring to. I haven't seen an abundance of that, but again, so talk a little bit about that. Who are they referring to? Are they referring to commentators? Are they referring to people at the ground level activism?
I think in this article specifically, they're referring to like staffers. They're referring to folks who've sort of come to DC and are coming to work for organizations and are coming to work for members. And they listen, they're enthusiastic. And you get involved in things that you become enthusiastic about. You get involved in the movement politics because you're enthusiastic about it. But you need folks who are going to teach you, why things happen the way that they do. I was particularly fortunate that I had mentors. I had leanings, and I had internal philosophies. But I had to learn a lot about why things happen the way that they do, and I was really fortunate. The really fun thing about being at this Western Conservative Summit in Denver was I ran into folks from an organization called the Mountain States Legal Foundation, which is one of these conservative public interest legal foundations. And as it happened, one of my very first bosses in D.C. Had been the president of Mountain States, and so it was a fun little reconnection there to that organization. But the point is, I got an education. I had my college education. I learned a great deal at William & Mary, obviously. But I got the equivalent of a graduate education in conservative policy from this blind gentleman that I was working for, who really taught me why our republic is set up. I mean, I learned why our republic was set up. Obviously, we talk about the three-wing circus of government, and we big fans of Schoolhouse Rock and all of those things. But to understand the concept, and John, you've heard me say this before, this 1992 Supreme Court case, New York versus United States, the phrase, the Constitution protects us from our own best intentions. It divides power among sovereigns and among branches of the government precisely, so that we might resist the temptation to concentrate power in one location as the expedient solution to the crisis of the day. Now, that paragraph is the counterpoint to what the Democratic Socialists are saying. It underscores what Bill Maher was saying. It explains the why. Federalism secures to individuals the liberties that derive from the diffusion of sovereign power, right? And those are true statements. They are tautological. At the end of the day, liberty is derived from the diffusion of sovereign power. When you concentrate power in one location, that power is going to be abused. If that doesn't explain everything that went wrong with the pandemic, I don't know what it does. And certainly every time I want to push back against something, let's not say dumb or idiotic. Let's just say the wrong policy choice that this administration wants to make. That's what I'm guided by. And so, actually, let me point something else out, because I think it was sent to me this morning. Tom DeLay has a piece in Newsmax. I think it's Newsmax. You guys are going to see my big Mr. Magoo glasses.
Okay. Goodness gracious. Yeah, you're not lying.
Yes, I know.
Not that I'm one to talk, so.
So, got this. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. It's in the Daily Wire. Tom DeLay on the Brendan Carr is calling for changing by fiat. Brendan Carr, chairman of the FCC. I love Brendan. I consider him a friend, but he wants to change the amount of media that any individual owner can have in a market. And this is something that Congress decided. Brendan Carr doesn't have that power, absent congressional action. So it's just, anyway, this is a piece from Tom DeLay in the Daily Wire this morning that somebody sent to me on this issue and why they did what they did. Here, if you can see that. Tom DeLay, I helped create this, blah, 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 blah. I don't know, maybe backwards. So that's, was it backwards, John? Did I send it up and it was backwards?
No, you got it. You got it just right. Let's wrap up this part of our discussion this morning, talking with the president of the Institute for Liberty, Andrew Langer, about this concern that we have. Obviously, there's concern of young DSA, young Democrats, indoctrinated through the public education system. When it comes to this concern over young conservatives, playing devil's advocate here, okay, if I'm even using that appropriately with how I'm going to word
Absolutely.
this. So, it comes off like it's the establishment concerned about a continued MAGA movement. I'm really trying to bring this back to the base level. When I see a comment like that, where you have young conservatives who are eager to push forward, conservative ideologies and ideals, you got an individual like Mike Pence speaking, who, staunch conservatives are not the biggest fan of anymore. It does come off like it's the establishment pushing back on the potential future of MAGA.
Right. But and that's fair, insofar as movements change over time. But let me add a caveat to this, which is, when movements become popular, movements get corrupted. And I don't mean that from within. I mean, or not necessarily from within, but movements get corrupted from without, right? We had a Tea Party movement that was begun in 2009, and the establishment had fears about the Tea Party movement, and some of them were founded and some of them were unfounded. But what happened is that this movement grew and a bunch of folks got elected, and at least it was based on truly conservative free market limited government principles. But it was when the Tea Party movement began to get infiltrated by the what's the word I'm looking for? The corrupt crowd. They're not shills, by the grifters, the grifter class. And folks began to claim the Tea Party movement as their own and use the Tea Party moniker for their own ends and pull it in places where the movement wouldn't have gone and didn't go originally. That's a problem. And so we had a MAGA movement, and we can debate back and forth about the merits of protectionism. But at the very core, some of it was about getting rid of big government approaches to doing things. And then when I see, let's say, a former Democrat very heavily involved in environmental policy in New York State, who is running as an independent and gets his movement gets co-opted into the MAGA movement. You see the opportunities for the far left environmental movement to start to infiltrate the MAGA movement under the guise of something called MAHA. And this sounds like a conspiracy theory. But right, when you have somebody like Lee Zeldin, committed conservative, true conservative, free market, limited government, seeing the bad juju that is happening over at the EPA, and he's getting in there and doing what Republicans have promised to do at the EPA for decades, right? Basically, since, carrying on in the post-Reagan tradition of reforming the Environmental Protection Agency. And you've got folks who've never been involved in the conservative movement who show up and they start to try to get Lee Zeldin fired for doing what he promised to do, and frankly, what the president promised to do. That's concerning to me. When you have a movement that is built on making sure that the government doesn't muck around needlessly in marketplaces, all of a sudden you have folks starting to say, again, let's cap credit card interest rates at 10% per year. And, you spin out all of the reasons why this is bad policy. And a 25-year-old says to you, yeah, but it's really popular. I mean, that's a problem.
Sure.
Yeah.
Andrew Langer, president of the Institute for Liberty. A couple things before I let you go. First off,
Please.
you mentioned earlier potentially sounding like an old man, screaming at the kids.
Get off my lawn.
I have an article from Bring Me the News for next hour. Minnesota man actually went so far as to lay spikes on his lawn to keep the kids away.
There you go.
That's taking it a
There
bit
you go. He
a
clearly
bit too
watched
far.
Last week's episode of the House of the Dragon.
Anything you would like those that are listening and watching you, president of the Institute for Liberty, Andrew Langer, to check out before we say goodbye this morning?
The new episode of the Lunch Hour, the Washington Signal Lunch Hour podcast, dropped today. It's part 2. Actually, we're going to have another part of this too. But part 2 of our ongoing series about AI and government power. I sit down with Wayne Cruz today and have a great conversation with him about all kinds of stuff. So check that out. If you're not following me, please do so. And by the way, John, I know this show has taken off because I announced my Twitter handle last week at Andrew_Langer, and I got a bunch of immediate follows, which is terrific.
Oh, nice.
At Andrew_Langer. So thanks for that. And by the way, just real quick, 200th episode of the Lunch Hour podcast. We're going to be recording that tomorrow. Thank you.
Nicely done.
4 years, which is kind of stunning. Thanks. It's going to be a music episode. It'll drop in a couple of weeks. Jerry Rogers from Real Clear Health. Your friend, I'm sure you remember Tim Lee from Arizona, Center for Individual Freedom. The three of us are going to sit down and talk about, ask such thorny questions as which iteration of the Rolling Stones was the best, which era was best. Were the Beatles better before or after they got facial hair? Such controversies there. What makes a great hit song? Does it have to have good lyrics, or does it just have to have a good beat and a good hook? So tune in the Washington Signal's Lunch Hour.
Andrew Langer, as always, man, great to see you. Great to talk with you, and let's do it again next week.
Thanks, bud. Take care.
All right, as we wrap up this first hour for a Monday here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment, I got a couple of clips to share, including another from Bill Maher. As we were talking about a moment ago, political commentator Bill Maher attacked the rise of Democrat socialism on his talk show, fretting how the movement has entered the Democrat Party. And it'll be interesting to see if Bill Maher is paving the way in any way, shape, or form for other individuals on the left who, want to be rational about what's happening to the Democrat Party. This is not the Democrat Party of old anymore. watch any of those clips from former President Barack Obama, who was playing a role back when he was in office, obviously, but even Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, and others, they used to sound on the major issues like conservatives do today. But the party has been taken over, co-opted by radical Marxists, labeling themselves as the DSA here in America. And you have gubernatorial candidates like Amy Klobuchar unwilling to go and push back on them. Here's a little bit more, though, of what Bill Maher had to say on his most recent show.
Vice President J.D. Vance was on the show, and I told him that if the Democratic Party keeps going in the direction of the DSA, my vote was in play. And all I heard all vacation was, oh, my God, you're a Republican now. No, that's not what I said. I said in play. And here's why. Because not a week goes by where I don't read about some newly chosen, exciting new face in the Democratic Party. And then when that face opens its mouth, the Communist Manifesto or some other crazy shit comes out. Again, let's just read the quotes. The DSA platform says you work as much as you are able and no more than needed. If that was any closer to Karl Marx's dictum, from each according to his abilities to each according to his needs, they'd be sued for plagiarism.
It's hour 2 on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment and AmericanExperiment.org. You can watch the show at MN Think Tank on X, also on Facebook and YouTube at the Center of the American Experiment pages, and on my personal pages on Facebook and YouTube as well. Good morning to producer Isaac over there, wondering if I got stuck there for a moment. Good morning, Isaac.
Good morning. I was ready to jump in whenever.
Well, it's good to see you. I'm glad that I have you as backup. Senate candidate Tom Weiler will be joining us coming up just at after the bottom of the hour, and then in the 8 o'clock hour at 8:30, we will introduce to you policy fellow here at Center of the American Experiment, Darren Nelson. Handles a lot of the energy issues. It's got a couple of articles, but one specifically will be zeroing in on the good, the bad, and the ugly regarding energy policy here in Minnesota heading into this November's election. So you're going to make sure that you want to hang out for that. As always, if you want to reach out to the show, john.justice@americanexperiment.org, john.justice@americanexperiment.org. That's JON. And you can leave us a blast. You can leave us an audio comment at any point during the show by simply calling 612-584-4565. That's 612-584-4565. Speaking of which, let's go to the blaster line and hear from you as we head into hour 2.
This is Mike up in Ely. Bill Maher and the stupid idiots on the View said that we have a lot of socialism in this country. What they don't and fail to mention and add on is that we have a very robust free market system that supports it. And I'd rather have a system where millions of people make the decisions for tens of millions of people rather than one system, the government making the decisions for the rest of us. And that's why we have the systems that we have.
Certainly an interesting take, and I appreciate your blast. It's a 612-584-4565. Andrew Langer, we just got off the line with him. You can always check out the podcast as well. It's available up on all major podcast platforms. And if you happen to be listening on the MixLR app, which is free, where you can listen to the live stream, also at AmericanExperiment.org, the podcasts are available after every show right there on the app as well. But we got into a really good conversation regarding the future of conservatism. We had Andrew Langer speaking at the Western Summit Conference over the weekend. Also, Mike Pence was talking there and referencing an article from Politico about the rise of young conservatives who may be too ideologically loyal to the party and may not be exuding a level of competence and intelligence on major issues. Really interesting conversation. Don't agree with the entirety of the article itself. Again, my sort of gut reaction to it was this establishment pushback on young conservatives who are leaning into the Make America Great Again or America First movement. Now, that is to say, though, you want to make sure that we have young conservative activists that are competent and are intelligent. But again, reading that piece, I was a little hesitant to hop on board with the commentary. And they were really kind of placing it in the same category as the young radical leftists right now. And there's aspects of it that I simply disagree with. But in the middle of that conversation with Andrew Langer, he brought up the MAHA movement and how there are some portions of the MAHA movement at the federal regulatory level that have been co-opted by some individuals on the left. Well, this provides me the opportunity to play a clip from over the weekend. Not directly related to what I'm talking about, but worthy of sharing on the show nonetheless. So RFK Jr. was on CNN. This clip has gone viral, talking with Dana Bash and basically just sticking it to Dana Bash regarding the embarrassing past of the media and how they pushed forward false narratives. Give this a listen here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
Debating this week.
Of course you are.
No, because I'm not
all
debating.
All you know how to do is repeat things that people told you and say, trust the experts. That's what you did during COVID. Now we know that Anthony Fauci, who was the expert, was lying about everything, about masks, about social distancing, about natural immunity, about the transmission from the vaccine, about the source of COVID. He was lying, and you were punishing people for not trusting the experts. And now you're rolling out the experts again to talk about something that you have no personal knowledge of.
Okay, well, guess what? That is my job.
I love the fact that, at least perception-wise, and it's been like this for a while, but as of late, I love the fact that people are showing a level of courage in going after the mainstream media in the same way that RFK Jr. did in that clip. The mainstream media did this to themselves. They became political pundits, the majority of them, not just the editorial individuals, the talking heads and roundtable shows. No, I'm talking about across the board. They all became, opinion, social media, influence generators, and their bias has been showing through for decades now. And I'm so happy to see the level of pushback that they're finally getting on their shows, the willingness of individuals to go on these shows and to go directly at these, alleged journalists because of just the double standard of the mainstream media and how in the tank so many of them are on the left. So just a hat tip to RFK Jr. there for pushing back on Dana Bash. Again, the blaster line is 612-584-4565. Friend of the show, Eric, has a comment regarding Bill Maher on the show.
Eric from Tennessee. Great show so far. Bill Maher is a 70-year-old man, and the DSA is going to basically wave off Democrats, the old guard. That's just what's going to happen. They're not going to listen to him. Fetterman, maybe they'll listen to, but anyone over the age of 70, which includes a lot of people, the Clintons, Elizabeth Warren, they're not going to listen to him.
It's an interesting comment, Eric, and I agree with you. The old guard that is leaning heavily now into the DSA, and I'll include Amy Klobuchar in this because she's not pushing back on any of this either. You're right. I don't see them changing their ways, but there are a handful of voices out there that are willing to step up and call out their own party. And probably more specifically, those talking heads that I was just referring to that go on the mainstream media shows, they get into these roundtable discussions. I'm just curious to see, and I'm not holding my breath, whether or not that encourages others to go and speak openly and directly against just what's happening to the party that they belong to. And as always, I appreciate your comment. Again, if you want to leave us a blast, That number is 612-584-4565. That's 612-584-4565.
Hey, John. I have a college-age young conservative in my family, and I have to tell you, after the election and after some of the things started rolling out from the Trump administration, he was really frustrated when the promises did not match how things played out. You know, there are young conservatives who are competent, and they just want people's words to match their actions.
Interesting. Heather, thank you so much for the comment. And, you know, I'm glad that we're having this discussion. It wasn't a conversation that I expected to emerge. It's kind of come out of nowhere, but it speaks volumes to what's going to be the future of the Republican Party, in as much as what's going to be the future of the Democrat Party. And what you see here is a sort of a mirror image of each other. You see the left and the young activists indoctrinated within the public school system. We know how radical they've become, but I also think what we're seeing is the flip side to that, where a lot of individuals who have been raised in conservative households, staunch Christian households. I've seen this in my own family, especially with my oldest, Logan, who's 24, when it comes to his political beliefs and how strong his opinions are on a number of issues, even more so than I am. And I think they're directly correlated with one another. And it's good that we're having this conversation now, because it's the conversation that we're going to need to have in the future, because these are the individuals that are going to shape politics for the decades to come. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so excited to be doing this show here at American Experiment, why I had initially invited Katherine Johnson and Grace Keating on my show prior to arriving here at American Experiment, because these are the individuals that represent the future of the Republican Party and conservatism. And I don't think he minds me saying so. Isaac falls into this category as well. And it's really educational for me, being around a group of young people beyond my sons, to see how they are filtering life through the politicization that we're faced with, which is certainly more extreme than I have seen in the entirety of certainly the 30 years that I've been a conservative, or I've been on the radio, or 25 years that I've been a conservative news talk show host, and for as long as I've been involved politically. So it's a good thing that we're starting to have this conversation now. I absolutely welcome it. Now, speaking of young people getting involved, kind of falls into that category, or it's just a really, really weak attempt at a transition on my part. So coming up, WNBA coach protests Sophie Cunningham with a pro-trans T-shirt as a bunch of lunatics protested outside the Target Center in the game, the Fever versus the Lynx over the weekend. I have some audio that I want to share. We'll dive into that coming up in just a moment, ahead of my conversation with in-studio guest Tom Weiler, who's running for Senate ahead of next week's primary. He'll be joining us on the couch here at the Center of the American Experiment studio at the bottom of the hour. And, of course, I want to continue to hear from you. 612-584-4565 if you want to leave us a blast. And you can email john.justice@americanexperiment.org. And let me just take a moment and I want you to be honest with yourself, right? Your old self would be disappointed in you right now. I was disappointed in me for a long, long time. I simply wasn't taking care of myself as much as I should have concerning my health and certainly my weight. Now, for you, it may be a circumstance where you used to own the room and now you don't anymore. You lack the confidence that you used to have. We can change all that with no pills and no shots. I cannot say enough positive things about the NutraWave program. I lost 22 pounds on the program, and it has fundamentally changed my relationship with food. I'm actually going to do another round of the program starting later this week, because I want to get down to what my actual weight is supposed to be for a guy my height and my age. For over 13 years, NutraWave has helped thousands of men and women lose the weight. Now, this all starts for you with a bunch of freebies. Limited spots are available, but you can get a Truth Metabolic Scan plus a red light therapy session. I've done the red light therapy session. It is incredibly effective. You've got absolutely nothing to lose, and the spots are limited, so all you have to do is call 952-260-1965. If you miss the number, drop me an email, john.justice@americanexperiment.org. I'm happy to hand it off to you. And any questions you might have about the program, 952-260-1965. Just mention the word strike. It's that simple. You're going to get the Truth Metabolic Scan. You're going to get the free red light therapy session, and you're going to find out what this amazing program entails. Again, 952-260-1965. No shots, no pills, just results. Now, individual results may vary, but reach out to NutraWave today. 952-260-1965.
If something sounds too good to be true, it usually is. We've heard over and over that wind and solar are the clean and green solution to our energy needs. Power without the downsides of fossil fuels. It sounds great on the surface, but is it true? Let's take a closer look. Every form of energy impacts the environment. Wind and solar are no exception. The only difference? You've probably never been told about their downsides. Wind and solar are both low-power energy sources that require exponentially more wind and solar farms to produce the same amount of power as nuclear or natural gas. This means greater material needs, which lead to unparalleled levels of mining, manufacturing, transportation, and construction, all of which come with huge environmental harms. The land use alone is environmentally devastating. A 1 gigawatt nuclear plant takes about 1.3 square miles. Solar, up to 75 square miles. Wind, up to 3,000 square miles. Powering the U.S. with just wind would require more land than 2 Californias. Then there's the materials. Meeting global net zero targets would require massive amounts of minerals, far more than the world currently produces. This means opening new mines, often in countries with weak environmental standards, dangerous working conditions, and even child labor. The impacts on wildlife are no better. Offshore wind disrupts marine ecosystems. Whales, for example, which rely on echolocation, suffer from hearing impairment and disturbed migration patterns. On land, turbines kill birds and bats, and solar farms destroy habitats. Then there's lifespan. Nuclear and natural gas plants can last 60 to 80 years. Turbines and solar panels, just 20 to 25. They're also not easily recyclable. So multiply the sheer number of units we'd need with their short lifespan, and you have millions of tons of material waste heading for landfills. The truth is, wind and solar aren't the magical solution we've been promised. The costs are real, the trade-offs significant. Low power, high material needs, extensive land use and ecosystem impact. Wind and solar energy production literally do more environmental harm than good. Like we said, if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Learn more at americanexperiment.org/shatteredgreendreams.
Yes, do that.
The best part of waking up is knowing
Kamala
lost to Trump.
And the blaster line on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment, is 612-584-4565. 612-584-4565.
Hey, John, just a thought on the young conservatives, because I have one as well. I think a couple things. First, they're out in the workforce, and they see how much of their money gets taken away from them on their paychecks, and they have, at least mine, has lots of questions on where it's going and why it's going there. So they're learning a lot that way. And then they see the fraud stuff on their phones. And then lastly, when they graduate school, they realize what a waste of time it was sitting in that classroom, because it got them nowhere in life. So they're definitely ready to make some changes.
Well, and I think when you couple that, the extremism on the left, there is a desire to rationally confront that extremism that they see playing out on the streets. I'm not seeing young conservatives wanting to go and be violent or protest in the same way as they see on the left, but there certainly is this level of concern and frustration that I've seen from, again, young conservatives, my sons included, where they see this extremism. They're concerned about what's going to happen in the future, and it is cementing their views and opinions, and in some cases making them even more extreme than you would, typically expect. Let's go back to the blast line, 612-584-4565. We'll hear from a friend of the show, Joseph.
Good morning, John. This is a friend Joe from Victoria. As per usual, you can sort out the Democrats into two categories, sheep and wolves. Bill Maher, like James Carville, is a wolf, but as the other caller said, from the old pack. And they can sense the tide is turning here. So.
Thank you for the comment, Joseph. You can also email john.justice@americanexperiment.org. Now, speaking of young individuals out there voicing their opinion, fighting for what's right, I think you can include some of these WNBA players into the mix regarding what has been taking place. Indiana Fever guard Sophie Cunningham's comments defending women's sports continued to reverberate across the WNBA on Sunday, as the Minnesota Lynx head coach Cheryl Reeve appeared to protest the Fever by wearing a Trans Kids Belong shirt during Minnesota's 108-100 victory over Indiana. Reeves' shirt marked the latest public response to Cunningham, who's become one of the league's most polarizing figures after saying biological males should not compete in girls' and women's sports. Now, in response to the Lynx coach wearing the trans shirt, ESPN was borderline gushing over the fact that she was going and wearing that shirt. Here's a little bit of what they had to say.
Well, we see Cheryl Reeve wearing a shirt today in support of trans kids. Trans kids belong on the shirt. This in the aftermath of Sophie Cunningham's recent comments. We actually saw Cheryl and Sophie speaking at center court pregame. And yesterday, Cheryl Reeve spent a lot of time talking at length with the media about this topic.
I would encourage anyone to go and listen to Cheryl Reeve's comments. Incredibly thoughtful, easy to find online, and just encourage anyone to go and listen.
Oh, but of course, don't go and listen to what Sophie Cunningham had to say, right? Just go and listen to what Cheryl had to say. Is there any... Can you point to another issue where... You probably can, but can you point, though, to another issue that the left is more incorrect about than boys playing in girl sports? That seems to be... That is like the biggest no-brainer. And yet, you have those on the left, including gubernatorial candidate Amy Klobuchar, still refusing to go and support the banning of boys playing in girls' sports. Before tip-off, Cunningham and Reeve met briefly at midcourt in what appeared to be a cordial conversation. Reeve later told reporters the two discussed the responsibility that comes with having large public platforms, but declined to elaborate on specifics. Both of us understand that we have platforms, and we both talked about wanting to, more than anything, to educate. As a matter of fact, I have the clip here. Let me just go ahead and play a bit of the back and forth with the Lynx head coach, Cheryl Reeve, and local media.
Before the game, you had a conversation with Sophie Cunningham.
I did.
If you want to share what you talked
Absolutely
about, feel
not.
free. But
Absolutely not.
More of my question is just how important is it to have those like in-person conversations with people that
I think it's
have
great.
different views?
I think it's great. I think both of us understand that we have platforms, and, we both talked about, wanting to, more than anything, educate. And there are some things that, we have in common, and maybe some things you differ on, just like any issues. And I think it's how you handle things. And so, it was nice to be in person, for sure.
So she's unwilling to go and talk about the conversation that she had with Sophie Cunningham, but she's more than willing to go and extrapolate further, talking to the media. How insulting is it to all of her WNBA players on the links to have their head coach wearing a politically charged shirt like she did. So listen, I don't watch the WNBA. The few times that I've considered watching the WNBA, it was one, Caitlin Clark, because of the controversies surrounding Caitlin Clark. And then two, what has transpired because of Sophie Cunningham. The WNBA is already riddled with all kinds of criticism. Right? There are memes online. I don't know whether or not it's warranted or not. Again, I don't watch the WNBA. But what a ridiculously stupid thing for the Lynx coach to go and do, to take the attention and the focus away from these professional female players and instead turn it over to this issue that the left is absolutely wrong on every level with. The atmosphere inside the Target Center reflected the controversy surrounding Cunningham's remarks. She was loudly booed during the player introductions, and again, nearly every time she touched the ball throughout the afternoon. Keep it classy, Minnesota. Some fans inside the arena also wore shirts displaying the same "Trans Kids Belong" slogan as Reeve. And yet you could not have a rational conversation with any single one of the individuals that were protesting Sophie Cunningham regarding this issue because there is no justification for it. The tension spilled onto the court during the second quarter when Cunningham absorbed an elbow to the face while defending a Minnesota player. Now, despite appearing to take the contact, officials assessed Cunningham with a defensive foul instead. The ruling prompted confusion from the game's broadcast crew and loud cheers from the home crowd after officials briefly reviewed the play and allowed the call to stand.
Good morning, John. It's Victor from Bloomington. The WNBA, they need to just rename it to the LTNBA. It's the Lesbian Trans NBA. Nobody needs to watch it anymore. Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham should go and start their own league that people will actually want to watch, that might have a bit of talent. But otherwise, nobody should watch the WNBA anymore. It's pointless.
Obviously, there are individuals that watch the WNBA. Actually, Isaac, do you ever watch the WNBA at all?
I have been to a couple WNBA games, but watch is a strong word.
Is the quality? I mean, is the quality? Again, I haven't watched any of it.
It's not great.
It's not great.
It's not great.
Why is that? That doesn't make sense to me. I mean, because listen, I mean, obviously, this is a really good example of what I was talking about a moment ago, wherein this issue of boys playing in girls' sports, I think it's exemplified in the physical prowess of male NBA players versus WNBA players. It's not to say that women can't play basketball and some of them can't play well, but there certainly is a marked difference in the quality of play of your female WNBA players versus your male NBA players. But even then, you would think you would be able to get together a solid enough group of female basketball players, or is it just a biological thing? Not that I put you on a spot or anything.
No,
but
it's so much of the NBA is played above the rim, like so much of it, the rebounding, the dunking, the passing, even. You just take away that element, it really does take away a entertainment value.
Interesting. And certainly going and focusing on the controversies is...
Yeah, it doesn't help.
I think unhelpful would probably be the best way to go in describe it, right? Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White dropped the ball, according to an article from Daily Wire, when pressed on whether biological males belong in women's sports, offering up a classic corporate-style dodge, while her own star player, Sophie Cunningham, continues to throw down pure common sense. Asked point blank about her personal stance on biological men competing in female athletics, White punted faster than an NFL punter on a 4th and long, according to the writing at the Daily Wire. White's soft answer on a hard-hitting issue is irritating, especially when her own locker room features one of the most outspoken defenders of women's sports in the entire league. Here's what she said, though. I don't know that I would say that I'm educated enough from a scientific standpoint. I don't ever believe that exclusion is an answer. I just don't. White hemmed and hawed, falling back on her childhood days of playing with boys because there weren't girls' sports. Now, pressed further on whether she would become, if she would welcome a biological male onto a WNBA roster. White doubled down on the tap dance. Again, it's like, I don't know. I'm not educated enough in terms of transgender and transitioning to give you a smart answer. I'm sorry. Based off of that, that response alone, like, she doesn't even deserve to be a head coach of a team if you can't even go and take a stance on this. If you want to comment, john.justice@americanexperiment.org. That's Jon, john.justice@americanexperiment.org. You can also get your blaster comments in to 612-584-4565. That's 612-584-4565. We'll get to some of those coming up here on the show. With that, though, I do want to welcome in Senate candidate, and I'll say friend of the show. It's good to see him in person, Tom Weiler. Good morning, Tom. How are we doing this morning, sir?
Great, John. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for joining the show this morning. And I know we certainly didn't discuss this ahead of time, but I would be curious, sort of, your thoughts. There was protests taking place outside the Target Center of Sophie Cunningham during the Lynx game. The issue of boys playing in girls sports continues to be a hot button one. Certainly, that's where this all centers around. Any thoughts on these controversies, Tom?
A fairly profound thought here. I think girls should play against girls and boys should play against boys.
It's very straightforward, and boy, so controversial as well.
Yes.
This issue, it seems like it's such a no-brainer. And yet, for me, I can only think that this is just your, for lack of a better way to describe it, Tom, your Trump derangement syndrome on full tilt. I don't think these individuals care at all about the issue. They just want to be able to go and push back on Republicans in the Trump administration. That's the only way I can make sense of anybody taking a stance that it's appropriate for a biological male to play in girls sports, Tom.
And I think on a bigger picture, what it indicates is how the goal lines have shifted in a dangerous way in this country. I mean, this is, in this specific case, think about this conversation 2 years ago, let alone 5 years ago. Republicans and Democrats, and I think DSA, if they existed back then, would all look at you 10 years ago and say, what are you talking about? Why would boys play in girls sports?
Yeah.
And to me, this is just one indication one issue of many where the goal lines have just shifted so far in the last 2 to 5 years based on this huge swing to the left by the left and the right basically staying where the right's been for a while. And that sliding goal line is something of concern. And I think this is a social issue of concern. But really, I want to keep things in perspective. To me, the biggest issues in Minnesota right now are we got to stop fraud.
Yeah.
We need to improve the Minnesota economy, and we need to chart a new course for this state and get on track. And that's why I'm running for the United States Senate.
Yeah, and we'll be getting into some of that coming up in our conversation. The website, TomWeiler2026.com. That's WEILER. 2026.com. Wrong Track Minnesota. If you head on over to AmericanExperiment.org, you can see the major issues that Minnesotans are facing and the irrefutable issues that Minnesotans are facing. And towards the end of our conversation, I'll let you choose your own adventure as we work through the Wrong Track list. But again, thank you so much for joining us ahead of next week's primary, running for Senate, Tom Weiler. So let's talk a little bit about your campaign. I want to get into the controversies of Farm Fest as well. But crowded Senate race. How are things right now when it comes to your campaign and expectations heading into to next Tuesday, the 11th, primary day?
Well, my expectation is to win on next Tuesday, primary day. And I know that would be a shock to the system and shock the world, but folks in Minnesota have done that before, so I intend to do that again. And really, I am feeling really good about our race, mostly because in the last 2 to 3 weeks, I'd say, as I continue to travel the whole state, I've been up north for a while and out west, focused on those areas, and now I'm going to be focused on the southeast, southwest and southeast the next week here.
Okay.
But I've just had a lot of folks come up to me, sort of out of the blue and say, I voted for you already, or I'm excited about your campaign. I saw you on, this radio ad, or I checked out your website. So I think my message is getting out there. My signs have been sort of distributed statewide. And we went with sort of the Southwest approach. One size fits all. So we produced one sign and got that out to all corners of the state. And I think we're getting some momentum, and I'm really excited about that. And fundamentally, I think just comes down to, I think I can be the most effective senator for Minnesotans to solve problems in Washington, D.C. and St. Paul to fundamentally improve Minnesotans' lives. And I say that just based on my experience, my understanding of Washington, D.C. and policies, my leadership, and then the problem-solving acumen I developed over 25 years of serving in the submarine force and involved with government and national security sector. And I think my experience is just, to me, will allow me to be an effective senator to really champion the concerns and needs of Minnesotans in Washington, D.C.
Well, as always, talking with Tom Weiler of the website TomWeiler2026.com. Thank you for your service, and expand upon that just a little bit. How do you differentiate yourself from the other candidates in your race? I mean, it's a relatively crowded field, and I know that you laid it out a bit there, but further expand upon that. How do you differentiate yourself?
Well, first off, I don't say this often, but check out, I think it was last Wednesday's version of the Star Tribune. Not sure if this is going to get on there or not. This is not pre-rehearsed, but right there, I just held up, and it's available on my website. Basically a senator candidate quality and future effectiveness index that may have been produced by my campaign, of course, but really it lists the 16, I think, committees in the United States Senate, and you know, most of your listeners, I'm sure, understand those 16 committees is how your tax dollars are distributed across our federal government. And of those 16 committees, I have professional work experience or relative experience in almost all of those 16 areas of the United States government. Candidates like Michelle Tafoya Peggy Flanagan, Royce White, or Adam Schwarzy, or Angie Craig don't even compare on most of the experience I have. That won't give me all the answers, but to me it makes me effective and sort of dangerous when I get to Washington, D.C. I know enough about the committees and what they're supposed to do. I know they're not doing their job effectively, most profoundly in the fact that the United States Senate has only passed 4 budgets in my lifetime. And I think that ability to understand Washington, D.C. and to identify and solve problems will make me dangerous in the Washington, D.C. area in a good way to go in there, proactively identify and solve problems, again, to bring it back to Minnesotans, and just fundamentally improve our way of life by ensuring our government provides a more effective and efficient product back to the great Minnesotans.
What's your personal motivation for running? It's been a little while since we've talked, and I know we've discussed this before in previous appearances on my show. But for you personally, you've run for office a few times now. What drives you most to serve, Tom Weiler?
Well, it's probably the same reason I joined the Navy 25 years ago. I love this country. I love our way of life, and I think it's worth fighting for. I look at my kids and my parents as really my motivation. I look at my kids and I say, this isn't the Minnesota I grew up in. I had a great experience growing up here, and I just don't see that same opportunity and that upbringing available right now unless we change direction in this state. And then I look at my parents. I mean, they're lifelong Minnesotans. They grew up in Morris, Minnesota, out in the west on farms, and my dad served in the Navy, so they traveled around the world a little bit. And then the first chance they had to move back to Minnesota, they did with my brothers and my sister and I, and we grew up in Eden Prairie. And I look at their sort of disappointment and just sort of downtrodden feel of their own home state, and to me, generationally, I look at something that we inherited something, and to me, we're turning over our worst product to our kids. And just like, you know, the parable says, you want to take something and make it better before your time on this earth is done. And really, that's fundamentally my motivation. I think there's a lot to improve in this state. It is a great state, but we can do a lot better. And to me, we have a responsibility, our generation, to leave this state better off than when we found it. And that's what I hope to do. Talking with
Senate candidate Tom Weiler, somebody had made a comment recently. And it's funny because I've now seen this in a couple different places outside of Minnesota, which makes me wonder if this individual had pulled this from the other places that I heard it. Be that as it may, it's this mindset that, especially here in Minnesota, you have voters who want to vote for Democrats who end up passing policy like Republicans. And there's some similar data points nationwide wherein it really is exposing how effective the left has become in spreading the propaganda against the conservatives, against Republicans across the board. And yet, when you really drill down the issues, there are a lot of Democrats out there that would like the conservative Republican policies. I mean, I mentioned this earlier when you go back and listen to clips from Biden, Bill and Hillary, Obama on the key issues that we're faced with today. They used to sound like Republicans. So how do you break through that? How do you break through an individual who is convinced that the right is evil and they won't vote for them, and yet it is the policies of those individuals on the right that they may be most in support of, Tom Weiler?
Well, I think your question's spot on, and to me that is that shifting goalpost. I mean, it's if you just write down the quotes from President Obama with regards to the border, and take out who said that and quiz the American populace, 85% of those people would say, "Oh, that's a Republican," obviously, making those statements.
Right.
And that was President Barack Obama talking about immigration. But how I reach out and what I've really noticed across campaign trail is Minnesotans are a lot less concerned with right or left or independent. They're concerned with what problems are affecting their lives and how can I improve those lives if I'm so honored to be elected as their senator. And that's what I'm focused on. Again, the other big part of my website, TomWeiler2026.com, is basically a list of 9 problems that I've identified on the campaign trail that are sort of the most impactful for Minnesotans, and my 9 solutions. It's that simple. Just check out my website, the 9 problems, 9 solutions. And again, these are mostly conservative solutions because I'm a conservative. And to your point, I think our conservative policies are more effective. And a lot of Minnesotans will read that list and say, you know what, I agree with a lot of your solutions, and even if I don't agree with each one, I respect the fact that you're presenting solutions. You see the TV ads right now by all the other candidates, and it's all just negativity and throwing mud back and forth, and no one's talking about a solution. And speaking of talking, Michelle Tafoya is completely avoiding to talk altogether. To me, she's back on the sidelines, too scared to have a debate because she doesn't have any depth or knowledge of what the United States Senate does.
Well, let's talk about this briefly. Farm Fest coming up this week. I know you've been posting about this online, talking with Tom Weiler. But there's some controversy regarding who is going to be speaking and debating there and who isn't. Can you sort of lay out what's been going on with the controversy and what's been happening with Farm Fest, especially with regard to the Senate race?
Absolutely. So we live in a democracy, and part of free and open debate is part of our system of government. And unfortunately, Michelle Tafoya, for her entire run, has had 0 debates. That's 0 debates, and really 0 hard questions from anyone, because she just has been in this sort of the Biden basement 2.0 version of her campaign. And so as we come up to Farm Fest, obviously the last big political event before the primaries, or I should say during the primaries, everyone get out and vote early and often. We come up to that, and there's 3 candidates for the United States Senate: myself, Adam Schwarzy, and Rebecca Whiting, who have served in our armed forces, and part of that service is obviously defending our democracy. And when it comes to Farm Fest, it feels like the 3 vets, myself included, are not being offered the full opportunity to participate in our democracy because we are not being allowed at this point to be on stage during this senatorial debate.
Any idea why that is? Is it just the choice of the individuals hosting it? Have you been able to reach out and sort of ask them why aren't we involved in this?
I've reached out to both Farm Fest and other officials that I've been directed at. And just like D.C. politics and St. Paul politics, there's a lot of pointing back and forth. Everyone blames the other person on it was their decision. But I think it comes down to, they have Royce White and Michelle Tafoya on there from the Republican side. And that's probably bang for your buck, the most entertaining. And again, comes down to profit. How many viewers and influence are you going to have? Where I think the more important element is to put the options on the table for Minnesotans and allow Minnesotans to decide. The focus of this forum down at Farm Fest should not be making a quick dollar or gaining influence by either the host or other candidates. It should be offering to Minnesotans a general picture of here's your options to be a United States Senator, now you're a more informed voter, so go out and vote.
Talking with Senate candidate Tom Weiler, in the midst of this controversy, are you still planning on being up at Farm Fest, or what are your plans between now and primary day?
Yep, I will be deployed out to Farm Fest. The USS Weiler, my submarine, will be there as well. So I plan and hope to be on stage. If not, I'm looking at jumping out of an airplane and parachuting in, something to that effect. But just kidding, I'm a submarine. I don't do that. But yeah, I definitely will be out there. I'm hoping for an invitation to participate in our democracy, and I will be out there either way to most importantly, again, talk to the great Minnesotans attending that event, specifically to rural Minnesotans and farmers, and understand their biggest concerns and bring those concerns to Washington, D.C., and hopefully solve problems to improve their lot in life.
We're going to get to the Wrong Track Minnesota items that are available up at AmericanExperiment.org here in just a moment with Senate candidate Tom Weiler. Let's turn our attention just for a minute to your military background. Two different things. I want to ask you about this. The cyber attack that took place on our water systems here. I know you were talking about your concern over this online. Before we get to that, though, in the first hour of the show, which if you missed, you can certainly go and check out via the podcast on all major podcast platforms or streaming on the MixLR app, MixLR. That is the free app. But President Donald Trump was poised for a major assault, maybe even larger than the beginning of Operation Epic Fury when it started some 5 months ago, attempting to bring Iran to the negotiating table. Those plans apparently at the moment have been halted as the president continues to seek diplomacy. There is rising concern that Iran keeps playing this game, which, as I mentioned at the start of the show, the administration, I'm sure, is very well aware of. But there's concern that Iran is trying to drag this out to get it to, say, October so that they have more leverage ahead of the November elections. Because, this is something that I think the administration and certainly myself and others would like to see, at least wrapped up, some sort of deal made, keeping Iran from being able to wage war. But your thoughts on what's transpired so far with your military background and this latest attempt of diplomacy from the Trump administration and dealing with the Iranian regime?
Well, I'll turn this over to Michelle DeFoy and see what she has to say. Oh, she's not here to debate. So yeah, this is based on 25 years experience in the national security sector. I was deployed off the coast of Iran for 6 months in 2020 on the USS Eisenhower, and 25 years of top secret SCI, understanding of the situation in Iran. And first off, I definitely supported President Trump's initial decision to sort of bring the fight to Iran. I agree with the theory or the statement that Iran has been at war with us for the last 47 years, murdering Americans across the world. And I think if you put it into the context of the Iraq war and the deck of cards there that, had 52 of their leaders that took America, billions of dollars and much more costly, thousands of American lives to sort of track down that Iraqi leadership when we went in. We had an opportunity to take down, say, 30 of their leaders with one strike. So I think that was definitely the right move. And I appreciated President Trump allowing peace a chance or negotiations a chance. I was skeptical the whole time, and now I think we are. I think we're past the point actually where we need to stop negotiating with extremist religious fanatics, and we need to eliminate the threat that regime poses on the Straits of Hormuz and our neighbors. And we can do that militarily, and it would involve some more significant strikes. But I think at this point, I think President he seems to be debating with himself on Truth Social and no connection to the real world when it comes to the Iranian regime. They're crazy, and I think I credit the administration, President Trump, for giving them a chance to maybe become normalized, the Iranian regime. Unfortunately, they've proven they haven't, and any agreement we sign is not worth the paper they sign it on, because they lie, and that their fanatical regime doesn't value their citizens like we do in other Western nations or other democracies. And because of that, we don't understand their motivations. The regime solely wants to stay in power, and they don't understand sort of rational acting. So I think we need to eliminate the threat they pose to Americans in the region, to our military, and to international shipping.
Do you buy into this? It's it's been fairly public, and I've even seen some commentary coming from official sources. But how concerned are you over these thoughts that we're depleting our our stockpiles of ammunition? I have a hard time believing that we would bring ourselves to a point where that would be a concern. But I'm curious, with your military background, Tom Weiler, do you think it's possible that we have depleted some of the missiles and the ammunition we've been using against the regime?
We have definitely depleted that. We do have the capability to replenish, and that does take time and money. But I think it comes down to priorities, and I think it was the right priority to make this the initial attack. And now I think we need to sort of complete the military operation to eliminate Iran's threat to the region and the world. And to me, we need sort of, I'll dare say the word qualified, or folks in the Senate and the House who understand the priorities of our national security. And this was a worthwhile endeavor. And now we do need to restock our supplies. By no means are we, looking at magazines and we're all empty and we're saying, well, if China does anything against Taiwan, we don't. Exactly. This has
been framing.
Yeah. The United States is not driving around with empty warships or empty submarines at this point. I can promise you that. So yeah, of course it has a tangible effect on our inventories, and I have confidence in the Secretary of War and other decision makers that we're clearly not fully emptied out, and we have the capability to defend obviously what we need to and present the president across the world.
Thank you for letting me pick your brain a bit on this. Just because with your military background, I'm genuinely curious your thoughts. And let me ask you one more question, then we'll shift our attention over to some Minnesota matters. But when it comes to the dismantling of the Iranian regime's ability to wage war. We know that they've continued to attack our military bases. There's been, individuals who act like experts online immediately regarding, tactics and why have we not been able to stop them completely? Are we not the greatest military on the planet? Can we, I've tried to do my own adding of context, the size of the region, how fragmented Iranians' military leadership is, how some of these factions are operating on their own. But I'm curious if you could add a little bit more perspective on the difficulty that it is, even with our, United States military might, to go and dismantle Iran's ability to go and attack us and our allies in the Middle East.
Yeah, it is a difficult problem. Again, the size of Iran is a surprise to a lot of people. The sort of
a third the size of the United States, for crying out loud.
And the sort of asymmetric threat that these small, sort of cheap, unmanned, like basically drones or not even necessarily unmanned water vessels, but a guy on a jet ski is tough to track down. Just picture yourself on a cruise ship. Or on a big yacht on Lake Minnetonka. I've never had that experience, but some people have. But if you're a big ship trying to drive through a navigationally congested body of water where you can't go left and right that far, otherwise you're going to run aground, and a little guy with a jet ski and a bazooka comes out, that's a difficult problem set. By no means is that guy with a jet ski going to take over the Straits of Hormuz, but he could wreak havoc on that one ship. So you take that and multiply it by 1 million, and that's the Iranian coastline. With that said, we do have the capability to completely eliminate the threat, but of course, President Trump and Secretary of War and all the military leaders are not. We're trying to minimize the damage to. First off, minimize the risk to American service members and our American citizens in the region and our allies, and also minimize the risk to Iranian citizens themselves. And we don't want to absolutely destroy their country's infrastructure to leave the Iranian people in a horrendous state once this military conflict's over. So what makes the United States military job more difficult is, one, the threat, the size of the area, and also trying to minimize the impacts of our strikes with only eliminating their military capability and not harming sort of not harming the overall Iranian population. Who knows what the real numbers are, but what I've heard is between 70 and 85% of the Iranian people want absolutely nothing to do with their regime. They're sitting in their basements or in their living rooms clapping every time they hear an American war jet fly over and try to eliminate the regime. So,
and that's the struggle. We want to leave them, a country that they can go and hopefully bring about a level of freedom, in their own way over there.
And John, oops, sorry.
Yeah,
just
go
real
right
quick
ahead. Go right ahead.
Trying to jump in here and take over your gig here, but bringing Minnesota and Iran together, clearly the water attacks. Yeah. And honestly, I was disappointed by both President Trump's comments and Governor Walz's comments, and because they both they both minimized the aspect of our American service members over there fighting the war. We've lost American service members tragically, and the focus on should be effectively completing this military mission. And valuing every American service member over there, and this back and forth about Iran didn't attack Minnesota water supply, or they did. What concerns me as a Minnesotan is the fact that Iran, if they did indeed, or if they are indeed behind these attacks, they've demonstrated a capability, which is to affect our water systems. Which it's not a tweeting back and forth, I got you, between our governor and the United States president. This is a factor that can significantly harm and threaten Minnesotans. And once you demonstrate that capability, even to me, they've already achieved some strategic win by demonstrating their ability to potentially manipulate water valves, because that can go from we demonstrated a capability, no damage done, to we've infiltrated your water system and now the water's unsafe to drink, and that could get into a very serious issue very quickly. So we need to take strong measures to, one, protect Minnesota water supply and our entire critical infrastructure system from Iranian and all cyber attacks.
Yeah, what Tom Weiler was mentioning, I'll share the audio again. You had Governor Walz posted in response to Trump's comments saying that the president can't win the war against Iran, which I just find to be a slap in the face to our brave men and women. But President Donald Trump, when asked about it over the weekend, had this.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Can you rule out that Iran is behind the water attacks? Can you rule out that Iran is behind that cyber attack?
I think that Minnesota is behind it. You know who's behind it? Minnesota, because they're grossly incompetent. I think the governor's behind it. I don't think there was an Iranian cyber attack. I think that Minnesota ought to get its act together. It's one of the worst run states. JD will tell you. He found tremendous corruption in Minnesota. Yes, sir. And by the way, just gave me a report. Massive future things having to do with corruption in Minnesota are happening right now. Thank you very much.
Well, and two things can be true at once here. One, you can still support President Donald Trump, and you can also not agree with his assessment of what took place with the cyber attack against our water systems, because as we know now from over the weekend, it wasn't just us. There were our neighboring states that were also attacked as well. How do we go about? I mean, is it a matter of just shoring up our own cyber security, Tom Weiler, when it comes to thwarting these types of potential attacks?
Well, this has been a significant issue that I actually I was fortunate while I was a military assistant in the Department of Homeland Defense and Global Security, working in the Secretary of Defense's office a few years ago. This falls under critical infrastructure, which is our water systems, our electrical system, our nuclear power plants, both underwater, on land, and in space. And this has been a focus of the DoD and our national security writ large for a long time. These threats, and it's a very, again, difficult situation, or difficult to protect against all threats. Yeah. But yeah, this should highlight a vulnerability that needs to be eliminated. And so the United States, along with our partners, have been focused on this area for a long time. But it's clearly an indicator that we need to continue to have active efforts to protect our systems. And actually, a sort of a good way to understand cybersecurity that I was exposed to a long time ago in a conference specifically on this was, I think it was a cyber expert talking about one, you need to defend, your cybersecurity, but a big element of cybersecurity is just like to try to make it formalized into sort of past understanding of wars is you need to understand if you're flying an airplane, you have threats at all times or potential threats that you're always scanning for, looking. But you need to identify when that SAM missile is in the air. And that's what our cybersecurity, a big element of our cybersecurity is. We're defending 24/7, but if we can instantaneously detect when something's an anomaly and sort of lock down our systems, that's something that, in this case, the second there's a attempt to penetrate our, say, Plymouth, Minnesota's water system, if we can have protocols in place to immediately identify that threat and take immediate actions, that's something we're continuing to develop in cyberspace because that area is continuing to grow. So it's a challenge.
As we head into the third hour here of the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment, we're talking with Senate candidate Tom Weiler. Tom Weiler 2026 is his website. Before we wrap up, if you head on over to AmericanExperiment.org, Minnesota is, of course, facing numerous different challenges. And at Center of the American Experiment, we've been highlighting some of the major issues, irrefutable facts regarding just how we're on the wrong track. You have some 68% of Minnesotans already feel that our state isn't doing well, and these particular items certainly point directly to why people don't feel confident in our future here in Minnesota. But we can turn things around. So what we'll do is what we're doing with all the candidates when they join us here on the John Justice Show, Tom Weiler. I'm going to lay out the different items that we are on the wrong track on, all available at AmericanExperiment.org, and you choose your own adventure. You pick which one you would like to go and talk about before we wrap up our conversation. So we have kids in Mississippi can read better than kids in Minnesota. Minnesota is now below average, is a below average state economically. 55% of Minnesota students can't do math at a grade level. Minnesota taxes small businesses more than any other state. And Minnesota's government let fraudsters steal over $9 billion. Now, all of these facts are backed up with the actual data and facts at the website. So choose your own adventure, Tom Weiler. Which one would you like to address?
The last one, I think it was $9 billion stolen.
Yep.
Yeah,
Seems to be the most popular one among the groups.
Let's talk about that one, because to me, everyone could use $9 million in their wallet. So to me, that's the one I want to focus on because, again, all important issues. But that fraud is obviously this $9 to $20 billion that's been stolen. That's not imaginary money, that comes from space. That's money out of your pockets from taxpayers that instead of being used for things the government should be providing back to its citizens, it's stolen and ends up, buying property in Kenya. And I look at the fraud in the context of affordability. I mean, this election, like all elections, comes down to the status of the economy, and affordability is sort of the term that's been used this election. And every Minnesotan, their lives would be more affordable if they had less government waste, less government fraud that was ripping their Minnesota tax dollars and not providing the services that they've invested for. And again, that also leads to the other aspect of that, which is developing an economy in Minnesota specifically that does value entrepreneurship, small businesses, and to do that, we clearly need to lower our taxes to be competitive with our neighbors. And fundamentally, our government is just way too big on multiple different levels. And for Peggy Flanagan to say, I have the answer here, let's make government absolutely enormous and have Medicare for all, free school lunch, free college education, when she's been number 2 in command of a government that let $9 billion slip away without anyone noticing, it doesn't even pass the common sense test. And again, she hasn't been asked about that specifically. But yeah, I look at affordability as the number 1 issue. And if we had a government that asked more questions, was fundamentally much smaller, so we actually understood what money was coming in and what money was going out, all Minnesotans' lives would be more affordable. And that's one of the many solutions I present on my website that will improve the lives of Minnesota. And again, it's TomWeiler2026.com. The 2 things I ask for all Minnesotans before you vote is just take a look at that website, look at the quality and effectiveness index, and take a look at my 9 solutions to 9 problems that I think will improve the lives of all Minnesotans.
Tom Weiler, really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for the time this morning. Safe travels. Enjoy your time at Farm Fest, and I'm sure you're going to be busy between now and next Tuesday, but it was great to have you here in the Center of the American Experiment Studios this morning. Thank you.
And for all Minnesotans, get out there and vote today or no later than the 11th of August. And like I say, vote early and often, meaning vote in the primary for Tom Weiler and then vote November 3rd.
Great seeing you. Thank you so much for coming on. If you want to leave a comment, 612-584-4565 is the number. Got a lot of blasts that have been rolling in. Let's go back to the blaster line this morning.
Like a lot of issues. When you're on the left, it's all or nothing. You can't have half opinions. You can't have pro and con opinions on any issue. You have to be all or nothing. Unlike the right, where you can disagree to agree, you can argue, and you can discuss. It's the only difference, and it's frustrating.
Thank you so much for the comment, Stephen. Again, if you would like to leave a blast, to 612-584-4565. And we'll officially welcome in Hour 3 of the show. If you miss any portion of the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment, you can always check out the podcast available on all major podcast platforms. Also, if you're listening on the MixLR app, you can also check out the podcast there as well. They're available right there directly inside the app. And remember, you can watch the show via YouTube and Facebook at Center of the American Experiment. Also, my personal pages, John Justice, and you can typically watch on X as well. But did I hear correctly? We lost the X stream this morning there, Isaac.
We did. It randomly dropped out on us.
What did you do? That's your fault.
That's the question.
What did you do? I didn't do anything over
That's
here.
$1 million question.
Everything. I blame X.
What did you do? I've heard that all my life.
I blame the overlords over at X for taking us away from X this morning. But we are professionals. We will rise above it, and this is why we give you as many different places where you can go and watch the show, Facebook and YouTube. I would encourage you to go and do so. As I mentioned earlier, we have a very busy week ahead of us. I want to give you a little bit of a preview. Coming up just after the bottom of the hour, policy fellow Darren Nelson will be joining us here in the American Experiment Studios. He's very far away in the office that is literally right behind me. He'll be joining us in studio. We're going to talk about a couple of different energy issues, specifically a piece that he has up now at americanexperiment.org, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the 2026 energy policy platforms of the DFL and the GOP. And Darren will break down the good, the bad, and the ugly of those policies, certainly on the minds of voters heading into next week's election. Tomorrow on the show, just as a bit of a preview, David Gartensteiner-Ross, we're going to talk AI with David. Tax guru Dan Pilla will be joining us in the 7 o'clock hour. We have a social media influencer that we'll introduce you to a little bit later on in the week. Becca Thompson. Kendall Qualls, gubernatorial candidate, will be in studio Thursday this week. And, of course, Friday, our Freedom Friday show with all of our guests on a Freedom Friday. If you missed this past official new launch of the John Justice Show presented by American Experiment, Freedom Friday, like I mentioned, check that out via the podcast on whatever podcast platform you use to listen to your podcasts. Speaking of the elections, let's go here briefly. Gubernatorial candidate Mike Lindell is now facing a legal challenge for giving away My Pillows with campaign literature at parades. I'm going to continue to say it. It was such a mistake he didn't go with the My Governor campaign. It would have been an act of sheer brilliance. You do the font like the My Pillow font. I was wearing my slippers this morning when I was prepping for the show. Just the My Governor was such a given.
It was right there.
I know.
Right there for the taking.
And it fits him perfectly. Instead, we get amnesty plans.
Next time.
And anyways, yeah, right. Next time.
Next time.
An administrative law judge found evidence of a violation of Minnesota campaign finance law as the Pillows have a monetary value and were distributed to influence voters. A probable cause hearing is scheduled to hear from both Lindell and the complainant who is upset by this. The complainant alleges that respondent directly distributed pillows marked Mike Lindell for governor from a parade float decorated with signs that said the same. You know, I wonder if people were paying close enough attention, how many other complaints could be made about like all the candidates, regardless of race, who do something similar. Just saying. A document from the Minnesota administrative law judge revealed that the complaint further alleges the pillows have a monetary value of $34.95. Taking the allegations in the complaint as true as required at this stage, the complainant sets forth a violation of state law. Now, when 5 Eyewitness News first reported questions about the pillow giveaways after a parade in Foley, Minnesota in June, Lindell said that he sought an opinion from the Minnesota Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board and was told that it was okay, that he could indeed give away his pillows so that voters could go and rest their weary heads on them, regardless of whether or not they were voting for him. He said in June, these aren't full-size pillows. So they're not full-size ones. They're little pillows, just like you gave away a hat or a shirt or anything. Our literature is incited. He followed all the guidelines to a T. Okay, so that makes sense to me. And this goes back to my previous comment a moment ago about how I wonder under this potential complaint, how many other campaigns could also be hit with a complaint along a similar fashion. Because I'm kind of with him on this. If these were like mini pillows that really you could rest your ear on, but not much else, right? I mean, although a $34.95, that is a pricey mini pillow. Anyway, Minnesota state law prohibits giving away things of monetary value to get people to vote in a particular way. Isn't everything comes with a cost? I'm sure there's specificity in the law, but again, let's be clear here. He's getting grief because he's Mike Lindell. That's the reason why. Let's see. Hamlin University law professor, campaign finance expert, and a go-to darling on the left in local media circles. David Schultz says, Lindell seems to be beyond the legal gray area. There's a lot of red flags, as Schultz told us in June. Lots of questions that we have. But certainly on the surface, it raises all kinds of questions about the legality of what he did. And this falls into something that I mentioned last week, by the way, of, the media. If it's somebody on the right, they're keen to go and bring in the extra voices for commentary, wherein, say, like at the beginning of the St. Paul Mayor Cooley her controversy, it was very, very straightforward reporting until the further details came out of the allegations and how egregious they were, because allegedly the St. Paul Mayor, is an incredibly horny woman, at least based off of the allegations. Then they started bringing in the outside voices to go and voice an opinion. Right out of the gate, we get the law professor, David Schultz, who makes an appearance in a lot of different media outlets, his quotes do. One more, and then we'll actually switch over to an update of the St. Paul mayor. But Mike Lindell, the gubernatorial candidate, was speaking recently with Channel 5, KSTP, and made this comment regarding his amnesty plan and illegal aliens. Here's a bit of Mike Lindell from that interview.
So what I was proposing was, you know what? Take these people, go give them to the courthouse, get them, fingerprint them, give them 6 months to do that. And then at the end of the 6 months, these employers could never employ illegals that didn't have that card, which they already have. It was trying to solve a problem here in Minnesota. It wasn't an amnesty, but I will tell you this. Now that this is all blown up, I realize I couldn't do that anyway, to have them come in and get fingerprinted in 6 months, because then I would be doing the same thing as our current government's doing with Waltz and them, protecting illegals and giving them these cards to vote in our elections and drive on our streets.
Yeah. So that controversy has kind of died down. I would argue, though, that whatever damage was done because of this amnesty plan is already done, as people are heading to the polls already ahead of next week's official primary day. Yeah. All right, here's a quick update on Shiloh Hendricks, convicted of disorderly conduct for shouting racial slurs at a child and a man in a viral video. Shiloh Hendricks is appealing her conviction, much like we predicted last week. And keeping with that theme this morning of multiple things can be true at once. You don't have to think that Shiloh Hendricks is a good person. You don't have to agree with the language that she used, but you can still go and support her right to free speech. Hendricks claims that the case is about free speech, while the NAACP and the Rochester City Attorney's Office emphasized the harm caused by her actions and the importance of the conviction. This is what the Rochester City Attorney's Office said regarding this disorderly conduct charge because of the language that she used. The state acknowledges what has made this incident so painful for many in our community and beyond. Ms. Hendricks fully admitted to her hateful and racist conduct toward a child with a disability and others, and she has profited immensely while showing no remorse. Okay, listen, all of those things, her profiting from this, setting up a GoFundMe regarding it, it's completely irrelevant to her making comments, whether you like them or not, in public. She can say what she wants. Sticks and stones, people. In the time of the following the incident, conversations and community-driven activities began unfolding across many different spaces, reflecting both immediate responses and long-term needs. This work continues today and remains an important part of supporting the community reconciliation and progress. Listen, under the guise of which the Rochester City Attorney moved forward on these charges, I mean, how many other individuals could move forward on hate charges on any number of things that are said in the public sphere on a daily basis? For crying out loud, I had a guy a couple of weeks ago as I was getting on the freeway to come to work here at American Experiment who was riding my tail. I moved out of the way. Apparently, I did something egregious to him, and he was telling me I'm number one as he went driving by. He's got a right to go and show me a specific finger that he wants, but you want to talk about harm and hurt, right? That's an emotional moment. I'm not going to bring about charges, but that's how ridiculous these charges are against Shiloh Hendricks. Again, you don't have to agree what she had to say, but if these individuals in the city of Rochester were really that concerned about the harm that her language does to the community, they never would have moved forward with any charges in the first place. They would have let this whole thing die out after the video was posted and moved on with life. The argument here is that with these charges, all you've done is continue to spread the word about what she said and her hateful rhetoric, which could continue to go and cause harm in the community. But it underscores the fact that the individuals in charge with charging Shiloh Hendricks do not care about any harm to the community. No, they're more interested in spreading the false narrative of systemic racism in the country. Shiloh Hendricks did her part to help them go and spread that narrative. But make no mistake, this, like so much of what the left goes and does, has nothing to do with what they actually say this issue was about. They want to be able to establish a baseline to go after essentially conservatives and Republicans over any number of things that an individual on the left may choose to decide for themselves is offensive. Again, I don't like what she said. I think it's a horrible thing to say to anybody, child or otherwise. And I don't think that she necessarily is a very good person, but she has her right to free speech. And that's what's being trampled on. And I do hope that regardless of my views of her and what she said, she does go and win this appeal. All right, coming up, St. Paul City Council members weigh in on Mayor Herr's sexual harassment investigation. Also, a businessman is donating $29 million to help Minnesotans pay for rent after the ice surge. And I'm going to give you a recent example of just exactly who this business person is essentially going and defending by offering up these millions of dollars. an arrest was made by of an illegal alien from over the weekend in St. Paul, and I'll give you details on that coming up in just a moment here on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment. So listen, if you're like me, you've probably been through wanting to take care of yourself. Clothes aren't fitting as well as they used to before. You go on a diet, you lose the weight, and it all comes back, right? And more. You lose a few pounds, and it all comes back and more. If that's been your life, I got the program that can absolutely get you on the right track. It's the program that I went with that helped me lose 22 pounds that I'm actually going to do another round on coming up very soon so that I can meet the weight that I'm supposed to have for a guy my age and my height. It's NutraWave, and it's built just for you. The yo-yo dieting, it stops today. You see, NutraWave turns on the fat burning and it reignites your energy. It's all natural. There's no pills. There's no shots. No excuses. The program is so effective, it becomes encouraging as you're on it to stick with it. And just through the course of the program, you end up fundamentally changing your relationship with food for the better. I feel better than I have in literally decades. When I got those pictures back from Rick here for the show, I didn't cringe seeing photographs of myself. And I want the same for you. Dr. Bob at NutraWave wants the same for you. More than 31,000 people across the metro have tried everything else, and NutraWave is where they got their life back. Now, they are taking a limited number of individuals, and what you want to do is you want to call 952-260-1965. That's 952-260-1965. Mention the word strike, and you're going to get a free Truth Metabolic Scan plus a free red light therapy session. I've done both of these, and the red light therapy session was incredibly effective. Again, mention the word strike because spots are limited. 952-260-1965. That's 952-260-1965. No pills and no shots with NutraWave. Now, your individual results may vary. Coming up, again, we'll get you up to speed on the charges, the allegations, of the St. Paul City Council members. Here is a little bit of commentary from Catherine and Grace from the Center of the American Experiment podcast that you might have missed from their podcast, available at americanexperiment.org every Tuesday.
It's so upsetting to see our leaders, like Governor Walz, gaslighting us, basically, and saying, no, things are going great. We are one of the best states in the country. Then why are people leaving? And why are people struggling? And why are people saying that Minnesota's on the wrong track?
Yeah, that is such a good point. I mean, it's just, every day you realize, like, you talk to people who say it's just so hard in Minnesota right now. And then we have people at the top who are completely denying that there's any problem whatsoever.
Think about it. Minnesota has always been a low crime state. But according to the most recent Bureau of Criminal Apprehension data, we are now above the national average when it comes to Part 1 crimes, a category that includes crimes like murder, assault, rape, and carjackings. Think about it. Minnesota is now a high crime state. Visit highcrimemn.com to learn more. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
John Phelan has this incredible chart posted at americanexperiment.org where he plotted out the CNBC ranking of best states to live in and the states that people are actually moving to and away from. It's a negative correlation. People don't want to live in states with these policies that CNBC, the great authority on this and that Governor Walz is touting, sees as, the ultimate factors in, high quality of life. It's just a joke.
I mean, that's the actual data we should be looking at, is where people are moving. People move with their feet. Where are they going? They're going to red states with better policy.
Think about it. A famous politician once said, "You're entitled to your opinion, but you are not entitled to your own facts." But in a world full of AI and fake news, where can Minnesotans find the facts? Center of the American Experiment is Minnesota's go-to source for fact-based analysis and common sense solutions for taxes, energy, public safety, and our kids' education. Visit americanexperiment.org for more information. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
Let's go back to the blaster line on the John Justice Show, presented by American Experiment.
Years ago, the St. Paul Saints, after one of their games, had this promotion to do the world's biggest pillow fight, and Mike Lindell sponsored it, and he brought in a truckload of pillows that they gave to every single fan, and it was a smaller version of his actual pillow, and it was a promotional deal. So I'm guessing it was the same thing and not his $34 pillow that you buy in a store.
Okay. All right. That makes a little bit more sense. Yeah, listen, this complaint against Lindell giving out pillows is pretty lame in my opinion. So something we'll certainly be keeping an eye on. What is much more important though is the continued controversy surrounding the allegations of the St. Paul City mayor. Now you have the St. Paul City Council members weighing in on the issue. So to get everybody up to speed, just the backstory here, working off of the Fox 9 recent article on this. So the investigation into Cooley Hers centers on allegations that the mayor of St. Paul made inappropriate and sexual comments regarding the police chief, Axel Henry, and other city employees. Henry's lawyer filed a formal complaint that includes a screenshot of a text message that he says Her sent to a city employee. The message reportedly contained a sexual innuendo, as we highlighted last week on the show. Henry's lawyer is now seeking data from each of Mayor Her's phones. The city has reportedly also hired an outside law firm to conduct an investigation. Her released her own statement saying, as mayor, I do take responsibility to treat every employee with professionalism and respect very seriously. I recognize that some of my attempts at humor fell short of the standard I expect of myself. We have fully cooperated with the independent investigation since it began in April and will continue to do so. I respect the investigative process and believe it is important to allow it to reach its conclusion. I remain confident that the full facts will come to light, and I will continue to focus on serving the people of St. Paul with integrity and dedication. The full facts part of this makes me laugh a little bit because this is no denial at all. She's basically admitting to what she did, but chalking the whole thing up to being a joke. If she ends up getting away with it, doing nothing with my fingers, whatever that means, it is only because she's a Democrat and a woman. If this is a Republican and a dude with these allegations, he probably would have already been bounced from office. So in a statement on Thursday, the Ward 3 council member, Sarah Jost, said that she's deeply concerned about the allegations because every city employee deserves respect and a safe and welcoming, inclusive workspace. Jost said she respects the mayor's right to due process and will not be commenting on the allegations specifically. Ward 4 council member Molly Coleman also released a statement on Thursday, calling the allegations against Mayor Her serious, saying there are many questions about the specific allegations that need to be thoroughly answered by external investigators. She added that the public needs clarity on the current relationship between the mayor and the police department to determine whether public safety has or will be compromised because of the alleged behavior or fallout from it. Coleman also called out the lack of transparency from the mayor's office regarding the investigation, which began in April, saying that the city council learned about the allegations and the hiring of the external investigators from the media reports. At this point, I'm kind of surprised based off of Her's suggestion that she was just making a joke or jokes. I'm surprised she hasn't just come out and said, you know what, I won't make those jokes anymore. I just won't. I find that apparently that sense of humor does not go over well with everybody. So I just will not be making those types of jokes anymore.
A comedian is never welcomed in their time.
Yeah, right. I don't think she was making jokes.
No.
I think she was legitimately making sex noises in front of people, and it was incredibly inappropriate and a little bit creepy. Now, this comes off of the fact that during her time in the legislature, prior to Cooley Her becoming the mayor in St. Paul, she had admitted that she was, or at least had said that she was an illegal alien. And then there was a whole to-do about whether or not she was or she wasn't. And I don't even know if we ever reached a conclusion on whether or not Cooley Her is actually here in the country legally. St. Paul could still have an illegal alien mayor. To that point, before we talk with our next guest, let me go here. This was from 2 weeks ago. I've been holding on to it, and it's relevant to a story that I have today. So I'm glad I'm glad that I waited. A Twin Cities biotech entrepreneur has given away nearly twice the amount of money he had pledged to donate to help Minnesotans pay their rent after the federal immigration crackdown left families struggling to afford bills. Let me say up front, I'm glad this is a private donation and not taxpayer dollars. This businessman, this biotech entrepreneur, John Wilson, has donated to community groups and churches in the city of Minneapolis to help families affected by Operation Metro Surge. He says, listen, if this is what he wants to go and do with his money, then he can go do this with his money. I don't think that it's money well spent. Be that as it may, if this guy wants to give away $29 million to help continue to perpetuate false narratives regarding ICE and what they did, and to support those that are here in the country illegally, then you know what, dude? Whatever floats your boat. He expects to donate, on top of the $29 million, another $5 million or more for the effort. So 5 months after the surge of federal agents receded, according to the article from Dino Winter in the Star Tribune, he and others who work with immigrant families say the need for financial assistance is still great for many Minnesotans affected by the 12-week operation of Metro Surge. The scope of need may just be coming into view now, according to the article. Wilson said people were reluctant to ask for help because they are eager to become self-sufficient. I don't know what would have happened in the absence of the amount of money we put in, but I have to believe that it would have been bad for landlords, he said, who know where these families would have gone. Wilson's company is a cell and gene therapy leader, apparently valued at $1 billion. So 29 million, or what'll be 34 million, maybe kind of a drop in the bucket for this dude.
Pocket change.
Wilson sold nearly 20% stake in his company for $257 million and created the Wilson Foundation, which had about $80 million in cash as of earlier this year. So who got the money? Let's just go there. You have a pastor at a church in Burnsville. And talks about how he's happy the state lawmakers approved $40 million in aid, 4 times the usual amount. He was concerned, though, for people without legal status, some of whom had their status revoked. His Latino church has received $1.4 million from the Wilson Foundation, which, combined with $350,000 from other donors, has helped some 1,212 families pay for housing for several months. I don't see this. Listen, I know that this is couched as compassion. I don't see this as compassion. Enabling individuals to continue an illegal lifestyle is not compassion, in my opinion. Holding people accountable is compassion. I've said many times on the show, and I'll say it again here, the most compassionate thing that we can do, and Trump has done this, is to secure our southern border to the best of our ability, to take away the ability and the motivation for individuals to come into this country illegally. That's compassion. Right, leaving an open border and then subsequently helping to perpetuate individuals' bad decision-making is not compassion, in my opinion. And then there's this angle on it, and we'll talk to our next guest this morning. But out of Alpha News, Sergio Magnana Gonzalez, an illegal alien from Mexico, was arrested in St. Paul after authorities intercepted a package containing methamphetamine. Law enforcement replaced the contents of the intercepted package with a similar-looking substance and delivered it to Gonzalez, who was subsequently arrested. The search of his home and person revealed additional methamphetamine and evidence suggesting his knowledge of the packages. So again, you have here an illegal alien charged with investigators seizing 10 pounds of methamphetamine in St. Paul. And let me just draw a conclusion here. Okay, what if this particular individual was one of the recipients of the charity of this businessman? Did this businessman think about that for a moment? Does he have any comprehension or any concern whatsoever that the money that he is doling out, which is his money to go and dole out, is given to individuals who may be involved in criminal activity, or does it just not matter to him? Is this just a means to continue to perpetuate the narrative that those that came into the country illegally have not gone and done anything wrong? Again, I'm glad it's not taxpayer dollars, but something tells me this individual, for as smart as he is, obviously, to have a $1 billion company and $29 million to go and spend, I don't think that he is thinking about all of the different unintended consequences of where that money could actually go. If you want to reach out to the show, john.justice@americanexperiment.org, or you can leave us a blast on the blaster line, 612-584-4565. Again, 612-584-4565. I had a comment that rolled in from a friend of the show wanting to talk about the protest that took place outside the Target Center this morning.
Good morning, John. Just woke up, just like old times. So I'll be getting a hold of you soon, and we'll have a chat about yesterday at the Target Center. I just can't believe everything that happened. Wow. I'm just like so, I don't even know. But thank you for having a great show again. We'll talk soon. Take care.
Thank you for the heads up there, Teddy, and thank you for the blast at 612-584-4565. The protest that took place outside the Target Center for the Lynx and Fever game don't surprise me in the least bit. That's what Minnesotans do. Joining me in the Center of the American Experiment studio is policy fellow Darren Nelson, his first appearance on the show. Good morning, Darren, and thank you so much for coming in. I would say early, but you're one of the individuals who is probably second in line next to, or third in line between me and Isaac, of getting here to the office early. But thank you so much for coming on the show this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Let's get you familiar. Let's get the audience familiar with you a bit. You and I have had a chance to talk a little bit about your background, but how long have you been here with Center of the American Experiment? And talk a little bit about your background and what you do, what you write on the website, and how long have you been doing this?
Yeah, look, I've only been with American Experiment for something like 8 weeks. June 1st, whatever that adds up to. So.
About as long as I have now. So maybe a little bit, about a month more. So you're fairly new here, just like me.
Yeah, so I'm currently sort of like focusing in on energy, environment, and natural resource policy. I'm an economist by trade, but interestingly enough, this is a very rare think tank. We already have 2 other economists here, so they actually don't really need me to do any economics per se.
You're really selling your job here, Darren.
I mean, look, I can't help as an economist kind of looking at things from an economic point of view, including my kind of nerdy charts and all that sort of stuff. But hopefully I'll bring something a little bit more interesting than charts and econo-speak.
Now, are you focused specifically on the energy sector, or is it broader? Is it broader than that?
Well, yeah, right now it's I'm very much focused on energy because we've had some recent polls done, sort of done by the American Experiment, showing affordability, no surprise, is like the top issue. And energy, of course, is kind of a big contributor to that, particularly electricity in particular. And electricity's often been quite ignored in Minnesota and other states because it's so heavily influenced by the Public Utilities Commission and that process that really no one pays any attention to. And fair enough, it is pretty boring. I've been to a couple of their meetings, and it was hard to stay awake for the entire time I was there. And I'm an economist.
So it's your job to go and take what you learned and then make it interesting and palatable for the average reader over at American Experiment, correct?
That's my job. I'm trying. I'm not sure I've actually got there yet, but I'm trying to become more interesting over time.
Let's back up a little further. You spent quite a bit of time not living here in the United States, but in other places. So talk a little bit more about your background and how you kind of came into this role of being an economist, here at American Experiment.
Yeah, look, I'm a dual citizen of the U.S. and Australia. Well, that's my little pin. I'm not sure if anybody can see it on the camera. But I'm originally from next door in Wisconsin. So I'm from Milwaukee originally, a cheesehead. And I've actually been mainly I've lived in Australia for much of my adult life. Long story, I got family in both countries. I ended up going out to spend time with my father and my 2 older brothers in Australia and went to university there. And then sort of did economics and law, became an economist in Australia for many years. Long story short, I came for a visit right before COVID struck. And I've been here ever since, which is a good thing. It's kind of good to kind of reconnect with not only my cheesehead, but my broader sort of American roots.
Was that because, again, talking with Darren Nelson, policy fellow here at Center of the American Experiment, when it came to your arrival here in COVID and then staying, did any of that have to do with the much publicized mitigation efforts in Australia, which made headlines, around the globe at that point in time? And certainly, I think we all got an education in Australian politics with that response to COVID, and subsequently even since then. Was it because of that, or was it other reasons that you stayed here in the States?
Yeah, it was that, basically. I was going to go back, and basically they turned it into sort of a concentration camp.
Were you surprised by that? I mean, based off of the policy there that you had seen, did that come as a shock to you?
Yeah, it came as a huge. In fact, I mean, what America was doing was shocking enough.
Sure.
That shocked me. And then when I looked at what was happening in Australia, and keep in touch with family and friends over there, including some people had to end up in those COVID hotels, which is like they would stick you in a hotel if you came back into the country for 3 weeks. With armed guards and food put underneath the door and that sort of stuff. It was, outrageous. Because Australia, when I first kind of moved there, was like literally the least politically correct, least woke, maybe second only to the U.S. as being the least socialist sort of place. And it just, it surprised me what happened in Australia.
Why did, I imagine that it was much like here in the U.S., of sort of, we're dealing with the unknown with the pandemic, and we'll talk energy, but this aspect.
No, that's fine. This is good. We can always talk energy in the future.
Is fascinating to me. What did you hear from people, back in Australia at the time? Were they in support of this? Because I think what happened here in the U.S. was you had, even myself included, and I've learned my lesson, and I've said many times on the show that my take on the mitigation efforts for COVID at the onset were completely off. I never should have trusted the federal government. And, here I was thinking that we were doing the right thing. And I was very naive at the time. And I learned a very valuable lesson on that front. But I'm curious, were those that you were talking to back in Australia, I mean, were they on board with this and then it went too far? I'm just curious your perspective.
Well, just a quick one before I answer that one is I was never on board. So my kind of I consider myself a Christian conservative nowadays, but I was, a new Christian back then. I was still libertarian. So one good thing about libertarians, they're very skeptical of anything government does.
Sure.
At any level, particularly the federal level. And I have the articles to prove it, sort of like I wrote some stuff that was published on my skepticism about this being, the sort of the masks and all the rest, and people forgetting that there's such a thing as natural immunity and all that. So in Australia, I think as here, and I have friends in Canada and the UK, basically in New Zealand. So throughout the English-speaking world, I got friends. I've worked in all of these countries, and the camps are the same. It's basically the urban elites who tend to be left-wing. We're right on board with all these policies, these kind of essentially fascist policies in a nutshell. And everybody on the right in all these countries were immediately skeptical, although like you and a lot of my friends, we were a little bit naive at first, like, oh, okay, maybe we should do this.
2 weeks to slow the spread.
Something.
Doesn't sound so bad, you know?
Something like that.
Let's get our arms around it kind of thing. And I'm just repeating what I said at the time, for crying out loud.
And actually, I was in Milwaukee at the time, and actually they only shut stuff down for like a week. And it was mainly like restaurants, cafes, stuff, just kind of shut down. Not everything, not grocery stores, thankfully, shut down just to kind of like space things out, all that. And thankfully, they all kind of reopened within a week or two in Milwaukee. So, so basically what on COVID and pretty much everything else, it's the same cohorts. It's kind of these, urban inner city elites, and sadly the kind of welfare poor who just kind of go along with these people. And it's the same in Australia, the same in the US, etc.
Yeah, I was just going to say. I mean, that sounds like what we're dealing with here. What's been the most surprising aspect of Minnesota's economy, specifically? Or it has anything about Minnesota's economy that surprised you at all when you've been doing your analysis and write-ups at AmericanExperiment.org?
Look, I think kind of two things: economy and culture. Like culturally, and in the economy, and they interact a fair bit. It's like a little piece of the West Coast shoved in the Midwest. I know, like Illinois and Chicago is deep blue, but Chicago's like old school, largely, kind of the old corrupt version of the Democrat Party. You can buy them off. They're not as quickly to embrace woke. Or that the Twin Cities is just like, and this reflects in the electricity policies as well. Like Minnesota embraced the renewable stuff before pretty much most of the blue states did, except for California, Oregon, and Washington. So so culturally and economically, they're always looking there for their bad ideas.
It's amazing to me how susceptible people are to those bad ideas, which is why it's important to get the truth, out to individuals. I mean, when we talk about those items on the Wrong Track Minnesota that are available there at the website at AmericanExperiment.org that I'm asking, every candidate when they come on to sort of pick which one they want to talk about. I think so far every single one of them has chosen fraud. So I think I need to stop giving them the option. I need to start specifically going and pointing to other ones. But Democrats have done such a really good job of vilifying and demonizing the right that immediately when you have good sound policy, if an individual goes and hears that it came from somebody who is a conservative or Republican, they just shut it down and dismiss it. And I think it's a big reason why we've been on the wrong track here in Minnesota. Hopefully we can turn that around. Hopefully people will be open to some better, more sound ideas and be willing to put away the party politics. But again, this is me being probably overly optimistic on that front. But with that, you have a piece available now at AmericanExperiment.org, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the 2026 energy policy platforms of the DFL and the GOP. So let's talk a little bit about this.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the good. And you sort of right up front, you talk about the GOP's 2026 official party platform, promote to economic prosperity, and then you get into a quote. We support the repeal of all carbon-free electrical mandates and any other renewable energy mandates enacted by the Minnesota legislature. What's your approach on this? I mean, I'm assuming you're trying to keep an open mind on these policies and you're calling them for what they are.
Sure.
But you're in support of what the GOP wants to do moving forward, as opposed to, which we'll get into, the DFL's plan. But what is it about the GOP's platform here that appeals most to you, Darren Nelson?
Well, look, I'm a free market economist. So as if you like transition, that's a terrible word nowadays, isn't it? As I transition from kind of libertarian back to conservative, interestingly enough, I still, my economics is very similar. It's still free markets. Look, I understand government's got to do certain things. One thing they don't need to do is to intervene in electricity markets to the extent they do. In particular, you mentioned the renewable energy mandate. That's really the crux. That's why electricity prices, I could stick up my chart. Obviously, it's not going to help your radio listeners very much, but, it shows electricity prices, over the 21st century in Minnesota have just jacked up, by 118%. And that's driven by, renewable energy coming onto the grid, and at the same time, coal going away. And I'll throw in a third thing, and at the same time, nuclear not allowed to expand, right? And so, I'll quickly pivot to the DFL. You said open mind. I kind of had a little bit of an open mind because there's a current study going on to look at, repealing the ban on, having no new nuclear, right? So basically they're looking at, hey, can nuclear energy expand? Now, look, I'd love coal to come back. it doesn't seem to be a particularly realistic option at this moment. So the second best thing is, hey, can we expand nuclear energy because it's reliable? And even from, kind of the environmentalist perspective of being obsessed with carbon dioxide, it emits no carbon dioxide whatsoever. And in fact, even the overall process involves less carbon dioxide than solar or wind do, interestingly enough. So I was kind of like, optimistic a little bit with the DFL. Thought, okay, at least they're kind of re-embracing nuclear energy, it seems. But on their platform, they point blank state that that basically nuclear power is not a viable energy source, which is actually weirdly enough. They obviously haven't discussed this with Governor Walz, because Governor Walz signed off on this study to look, and I think, the writing on the wall behind the study is basically that they want the thumbs up to having more nuclear energy.
Right.
That's Democrats and Republicans, right? So I'm not sure why the platform of the DFL has this basically presumption that nuclear power is not a violent. I don't even know what that means.
I would give it I wouldn't be surprised if they went the route of what you typically hear regarding the potential of, say, creating an infrastructure of small nuclear facilities for power and the dangers, doing that thing with my fingers, that come with that. That's typically the talking point against nuclear facilities, is that these could be very dangerous for the environment and the community if something were to go wrong. But to go and say that they're not an effective way to go and generate energy, that's utter nonsense. It's ridiculous.
Well, ironically, the only time nuclear has really been dangerous is when it's been run by socialists. Basically, in the Soviet Union, they're the ones who completely, screwed things up. Basically, even 3 Mile Island was like a minor incident compared to Chernobyl, obviously.
Yeah. I'm assuming you've watched the Chernobyl series?
I didn't. Was it good?
So good. So great.
Yeah.
I recommend everybody watch the Chernobyl series. I believe it was on HBO. Isaac, Chernobyl series? No?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
I guess
I'm alone on this island.
I do recall, I know you're a bit of a pop culture aficionado. You remember the show River Monsters?
I do not know the show River Monsters.
It's pretty awesome. Anyway,
okay.
So this guy goes usually in the Amazon because most of the dangerous fish in fresh water happen to be in the Amazon.
Okay.
But anyway,
reality show?
Yeah,
Okay.
he's basically a fisherman. This British guy, he's a professional fisherman. He goes around trying to catch these. He starts off with an interesting story about this fish apparently killed someone, blah, 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 piranhas, whatever. But he did go to Chernobyl once and do some fishing, and he found, things are fine, actually. Even the worst nuclear accident in the world, it's not like you have to wait 500 years for things to clear up.
Okay. Interesting.
It's fine. It doesn't look great because they just let everything run down.
Right.
But in terms of the natural stuff, it's fine. So he went fishing there. There was no Simpsons three-eyed fish or anything like that.
I mean, 'cause that's always the narrative, is that you can't go, every single trope around Chernobyl and the region is that everything's been infected by radiation. You can't spend any time there. Don't go anywhere near it, or you're right, you're going to grow a thumb out of your forehead, but it's not necessarily the case. Let's go back to the rise in energy costs really quick.
Yeah.
Because one thing that kind of stuck out, I'm looking at the chart that you have.
I'm not sure where the camera is. Where am I looking exactly?
You got it. You're good.
Something
You're good.
like that?
There you go. Yeah.
Look at bad. These two lines going up, bad. This little green line going down, also bad, because that's actually usually, you want prices to go down and consumption of energy to go up, particularly in a digital age where everything uses electricity, right? So, you're getting hit by prices and we're reducing the use of electricity as well. So that's a double whammy to affordability and wealth.
With that, though, we're not getting, what are we getting extra for the amount of money, the increased spending for your, that's the thing that stuck out to me. It's like, okay, we're paying more money. What are we getting for it? I assume the DFL is saying, well, we're combating, climate change through all of this. But the reality is, energy is energy. We need it. We pay for it. We get it. We may use more. We may have to pay more. But at the same time, I guess the question I have is, okay, we're all paying more for our energy. What are we actually getting out of it as a community, as taxpayers?
Well, look, I'll make a kind of a unscientific statement, but it's kind of broadly true. So what you're getting for it is the ever so slightest reduction of carbon dioxide over the course of 20 odd years in Minnesota, putting aside, obviously, this is a global phenomenon. It's not restricted to Minnesota or anything like that. Putting aside, sorry, that I don't actually believe that there is a problem. But anyway, so, I mean, China, kind of just in a week, kind of just gets rid of whatever Minnesota accomplished on that front over the course of 20 odd years. So it is ridiculous. So what you get for it is much higher electricity prices and being forced to use less of it because you just can't afford as much. Essentially, that's what you're getting for it.
Let's get back to your piece. Again, talking with policy fellow Darren Nelson here at Center of the American Experiment. So we've kind of gone through the good, the bad. Let's touch upon the ugly and the bold in your piece in the closing minutes of the show here this morning at American Experiment.
Yeah. Look, I'm probably trying to throw too many pop culture references in, Mike.
I appreciate it.
Well, I put the good, the bad, and ugly is enough, but then I tried to throw in the bold and the beautiful.
Yeah, no, I got it. I got it. It was a nice little soap opera reference. I certainly picked up on that when I was doing notes this morning.
So yeah, look, the ugly was the DFL's particular. The bad, I should say. The bad is, yes, they want more renewable. So this, doubling down on something that hasn't worked. And then to make it worse, as I mentioned, they think nuclear power is not viable, at least on their platform. So I'm not sure what fight they'll have behind the scenes between the people who write the platform and then, I'm not sure where Klobuchar stands on us, if she's kind of open-minded to having more nuclear or not. And then, I thought, just to complete it, the bold and the beautiful, I thought the GOP had, I think it was quite bold because often the GOP is so wimpy, basically. They'll attack it. They'll attack kind of this renewables, et cetera, from an economic perspective, and that's good. But I think the reason we even have this is we discuss is this belief in man-caused climate change, and it's going to be catastrophic. So I thought it was very bold of them to actually state, we oppose this. We think this theory is garbage. I think that's awesome. In fact, as a side note, the UN has actually backed off their catastrophic predictions on climate change. The UN has. Yet Minnesota is still sticking with it.
Yeah.
And then the beautiful, I thought, was, as a free market guy, they went further to oppose any sort of government mandate in any area and subsidies and monopolies. This is one thing I want to highlight here, and I've started to highlight, is why do we have to have these monopolies? Why does Xcel Energy have to get a monopoly on electricity? In fact, in the U.S., they've moved away from this sort of approach, and they certainly moved away from this approach in other parts of the world a long time ago. Australia, to its credit, decided, well, are these natural monopolies all that natural? No, they're not. Actually, they're just government fictions, essentially.
Are you seeing a trend? You mentioned it a moment ago, but are you seeing a trend of individuals coming around on climate change? Is it less popular of a means to push energy policy than it has been in the past, despite a sort of a smattering of like the UN? And the UN is not a smattering by any stretch, but whether or not anybody actually adheres to what the UN is saying is a different ballgame altogether. But do you see any sort of shift in the mentality of pushing forward on energy needs based off of what people believe the demands are to deal with climate change?
Sadly, no. Actually, these were always kind of like ideological stances in a sense. I think on the right, a lot of people just embrace being against it because that's what our tribe does. Fortunately, they're also on the side of good facts and good science. The left they're sticking to it no matter what, as you can see in Minnesota. What has changed, actually, is just the reality of the data centers. The big tech leftists apparently like making money more than they like their ideology, which is actually a surprise to me. Actually, it's a refreshing surprise. So what's changed is, we're going to look at because the left hated nuclear power forever, right? In fact, they hated it before there was ever climate change, came into the parlance. And they stuck to it, even though, okay, if you really believe climate change is a thing and it's catastrophic, well, the best option is nuclear energy, yet they resisted it. Until the past couple of years, the Bill Gates of this world have go well, wind and solar ain't gonna it's not going to get it done. We need these data centers. We need lots of energy. We need it quickly. We need it to work. And we need it not to break the bank as well. So, sure, they're not going to go and call for coal again, because that's one step too far ideologically for them. But nukes, so nukes is really back on the agenda, not because we made a difference, sadly. I think we made some sort of difference. I think some of the campaigns at American Experiment are quite good, but what made the big difference was big tech. They're embracing nuclear power.
Interesting. Darren Nelson, certainly not the last time that we'll have a discussion with you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I encourage everybody to head on over to AmericanExperiment.org and check out the good, the bad, and the ugly, the 2026 energy policy platforms of the DFL and the GOP. Fantastic reading, especially ahead of next week's primaries, as are all of the pieces that you've been putting up at AmericanExperiment.org. And again, Darren, thank you so much for coming across the hall and joining us on the sofa here at the American Experiment Studios.
Always a pleasure.
All right, on tomorrow's show, got a couple of items that we'll dive into, including one from another policy fellow here, John Phelan. Newly legalized bathhouses already asking for taxpayer money. Yeah, it's true. Also, a bit of good news, at least for as good as it can be, regarding paid family medical leave. Apparently, the Minnesota paid leave payroll tax rate will remain the same next year, although they are eyeing a tax increase in 2028. So we'll have details on both of those items and all of the news from overnight, plus David Gartenstein-Ross, our AI analyst and expert, will be joining us at 6:30 tomorrow. You can get any artificial intelligence-related questions and questions for our tax guru, Dan Pilla, who will be with us in the 7 o'clock hour. Get those in early. John.justice@AmericanExperiment.org. That's Jon, John.justice@AmericanExperiment.org. You can also leave your audio questions to the Blaster line at 612-584-4565. If you missed that number too, you can email me. I'll give it to you. But 612-584-4565. Remember, when you go to AmericanExperiment.org, go to my page there, and you can make a donation here to Center the American Experiment and get yourself a free John Justice Show embroidered hat. People love the fact that they're embroidered. Also, there are mugs available now on the merchandise site, and we have more merchandise coming very, very soon. Thank you so much for hanging out with the show this morning. If you missed any portion of the show today, you can watch the replays that will be available up at Facebook and on YouTube at Center of the American Experiment. Also, catch up with the podcast, available on all major podcast platforms and the MixLR app. Have yourself a fantastic rest of your Monday, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow morning starting at 6 a.m. Now we'll send you out with a little full version of Zima Fizz to get you going for the rest of your Monday. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow morning. Bye.
Static waves at dawn, a voice that lingers when night is gone. Twin cities hum with stories spun. John Justice rides the rising sun.